Chapter 273. However, Qi was soon disappointed because although Qi Yingying's body was very healthy, there was no trace of Qiren's aura. There was also no elemental energy fluctuation, just like a piece of white paper. Qi frowned and said, Yingying, it is not impossible for you to cultivate, but it is not easy to achieve success. I don't know if you have heard of the saying, those who are born with knowledge are the best. In traditional understanding, those who are born with knowledge don't seem to exist, but in the real sense, almost all strong people are born with knowledge. In other words, before they could become stronger, there was a prerequisite, and that was that they had this special ability in their bodies. Acquired cultivation is only to amplify the innate ability. Qi Yingying listened to Qi Yu's description of the mystery of cultivation and couldn't help but be interested. She asked, Brother, then I have no chance at all? Qi Yu said, It is not that there is no chance, but it is very difficult. However, if you are willing to work hard, at least your body will be much stronger than an ordinary person. I can try my best to turn your body into one that is born with knowledge, but at the same time, you need to work hard to achieve results. Okay, brother, I will definitely work hard. Perhaps because she was a little too excited, Qi Yingying's voice was a little louder, causing others to look in their direction. The teacher's face sank and said, Student Qi Yingying, do you have any questions? Qi Yingying stuck out her tongue and hurriedly shook her head. The teacher's gaze fell on Qi Yu and said, Student Qi Yingying's grades in the class have always been average. When you go back, you need to work harder. Qi Yu nodded, indicating that he understood. The teacher continued her long speech, while Qi Yu was already thinking about how to help his sister become stronger. After thinking for a while, in order not to disturb the parent-teacher meeting, Qi Yu took a piece of paper from Qi Yingying and wrote on it, Water, fire, wind, thunder for kinds of energy, choose one you like. Remember, after you choose, you can never give up or change it. Qi Yingying looked at the 4 words, water, fire, wind, and thunder. He couldn't help but hesitate. He looked at this and then at that. She ruled out lightning, perhaps because Lei Tao had the ability to use lightning. Just when Qi Yu thought she was going to choose the water element that was more suitable for girls, Qi Yingying circled the fire element. Brother, I want this. Qi Yu could not help but ask curiously, why did you choose the fire element? Don't you think water is more suitable for girls? Qi Yingying shook her head and said, No way. I want to be famous. There are so many benefits to fire. It could also be used for lighting. It can also be used for warmth. Furthermore, it could be used for barbecue when playing outside. With so many uses, of course I'll choose it. Qi Yu was speechless as he looked at his sister. She actually cultivated for the sake of barbecuing. This was really too much of an idea. However, he soon felt relieved. Qi Yingying's thoughts proved that she didn't have any competitive spirit, which was a very good result. No matter how much she cultivated in the future, it wouldn't cause too much trouble. The parent-teacher conference lasted for a full 2 hours before it ended. In the end, the teacher specially talked to Qi Yu. When she learned from Qi Yingying that Qi Yu was the deputy general manager of the Golden Valley Group, the way she looked at Qi Yu suddenly changed. At first, she told Qi Yu to control Qi Yingying and not let her have too much contact with boys in school. Later, she began to probe about her situation and even asked if she was married. Qi Yu impatiently dealt with it for 20 minutes before he and Yingying escaped from the abyss of suffering. When leaving the school circle, Qi Yu couldn't help but think of the situation when he was in school. As an orphan, the biggest advantage was that he didn't need to invite his parents to the parent-teacher conference. Of course, it was also his greatest pain. On the way back to the Golden Valley Group, Qi Yu said to Yingying, if you want to learn the method of cultivation, I have no objection, and I will guide you wholeheartedly. However, there are some things you must firmly remember, and you must not violate them. First of all, when you have extraordinary strength, you must not easily show it in front of ordinary people, unless there's a special situation or your safety is in danger. Yingying nodded and said, I understand. People with special abilities are like Big Brother. They want to be hermits, right? Qi Yu smiled and said, The second point is more important. In the process of cultivation, you must not be impatient. It is better not to cultivate than to show off. Otherwise, if there is a danger, then your life will be in great danger. Do you understand? Ying said, Big brother, are you talking about cultivation deviation? Yu said, something like that. As long as you remember these 2 points and correct your mentality, then there will be no other problems. I still have a lot of things to do now. I can't always accompany my parents. I also hope that you can have a certain level of strength so that you can be the closest to protecting my parents. They're already old. I can at most improve their physical condition, make them healthier, but I can't let them start cultivating again. I'll lend this to you for the time being. As he said that, Yu took off the relic bead from his left wrist and put it on Ying's hand. Towards this little sister of his, he could be said to be very careful. With the protection of the relic bead, it would not be easy for her to go into cultivation deviation. Ying didn't understand and asked doubtfully, Big brother, you are so stingy. Why don't you give it to me? Yu smiled bitterly. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, but this bracelet has an extremely precious meaning. It was given to me by a good friend. Don't be fooled by its ordinary appearance. Its preciousness is not something that money can compare to. This bracelet is called the relic bead. It is made from the Buddhist relics of 10 generations of Buddhist masters after their cremation. It has the effect of calming the mind and dispelling evil. It is most suitable for beginners like you. You must take good care of it. You must not lose it. Otherwise, Big brother will not be able to explain it to that friend. Seeing how serious Yu was, Ying couldn't help but feel nervous. So precious. Big brother, don't worry. I will definitely carry it with me at all times. Hey, there seems to be a warm flow of air on it. It feels very comfortable. Yu smiled slightly, saying, In the future, you will feel more of the benefits it brings. Since you have chosen fire, then before I leave, I will first teach you the cultivation method of fire. Practice according to the method I said. When I come back, I want to check your cultivation progress. Ying giggled. He said, All right, we are here. Let's go in. As soon as they entered the Golden Valley building, the receptionist took the initiative to greet them. Yu respectfully said, Deputy General Manager, the chairman said that you should immediately see him when you come back. Yu knew that his father must have already known of his return, so he agreed and brought Ying to the top floor of the Golden Valley building. Ying Xiaodai just happened to be in Qi Tianlei's office, seeing her son and daughter return at the same time. She couldn't help but smile. I heard from the subordinates that you have already been here today. You've already been here today. Why did you come back and leave? Ying stuck out her tongue, frankly said, I pulled Big brother away. Let him accompany me out for a walk. There's a parent-teacher meeting this afternoon. You're all so busy, so I asked Big brother to go. How could Qi Tianlei not understand his daughter's little trick? But he didn't say anything. He didn't have too much hope for his daughter's studies. It's good that you're back. I haven't seen you for so many days. What are you busy with? Yu smiled bitterly in his heart. Dad, it's better not to tell you what I am busy with. Otherwise, will you let me go to space to adventure? He hurriedly said, There are some confidential matters to deal with. It's almost over. In another half a month, I will definitely come back to accompany you. I will be leaving in a while. I can't accompany you for dinner. Ying was stunned for a moment. Only then did she understand how tight her brother's time was. She couldn't help but regret pulling Yu away for the parent-teacher meeting, so that her brother had less time to reunite with his parents. Sure enough, Ying Xiaodai said with some disappointment, You are leaving so soon? It's still the same words, come back. Don't do anything dangerous anymore. We are willing to compensate the country. Yu said with a smile, It's okay, Mom. This is not a problem of the country, but there are some things I must do. If he really wanted to stay away from trouble, it was not impossible. The country could not restrict him. However, the asteroid was about to hit the Earth. Could he really leave? The answer was definitely no. Sighing in his heart, he continued to speak to Qi Tianlei and his wife. Ying just told me that she also wants to learn some self-defense skills. I have checked her body. There shouldn't be too much a problem. Before I leave, I will first teach her the cultivation method. Dad, Mom, if you have any work to do, go ahead. Qi Tianlei shook his head and said with some excitement, It's okay, your mom and I can do our work at any time, and we can also not do it at any time. I have always been very interested in your special abilities. Can this also be learned? Chiyu said with a smile. It might not be possible for others, but if it is me teaching, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Chi Tianlei thought for a moment, then said, Then can I and your mom learn? To be honest, when I was young, I admired those with special abilities. Chiyu hesitated for a moment, then said, It's not completely impossible. It's just that you are a bit older, so you won't be able to achieve too much. Chi Tianlei said with a smile, We don't need to achieve anything. Having a pair of children like you is the greatest achievement for me and your mom. We just want to experience what it feels like to be a Superman. If it doesn't work, then forget it. Looking at the light of hope in Chi Tianlei's eyes, Chiyu couldn't help but grit his teeth and said, All right then, I will try. You two should also try. If you can achieve some small achievements, you can at least defend yourself. It was good for parents to have self-defense abilities, and the cultivation of energy would greatly prolong their lives, so that their body functions wouldn't easily fail. The same question appeared in front of Chi Tianlei and his wife. Chiyu asked them what kind of energy they wanted to choose to cultivate, and the choices were still the 4 types of energy that Chiyu was good at. Ying Xiaodai did not hesitate to choose water. This was something that Ying was not like her. After Chi Tianlei hesitated for a moment, he chose wind. When Chiyu asked him why, Ying Xiaodai's reason was very simple. Because water was the source of life, she naturally liked water, so she directly chose it. Chi Tianlei's reason reflected his mood as the chairman of the Golden Valley Group's board of directors. Because he longed for freedom, and wind was undoubtedly the freest of the 4 types of energy. Looking at his excited parents and sister, Chiyu secretly smiled bitterly in his heart. The 3 of them chose 3 types of energy that they couldn't use. It was not an easy thing to help them with enlightenment. After all, they were just ordinary people. It was easier said than done to quickly improve their abilities. However, Chiyu didn't hesitate for too long. After Chi Tianlei told the security outside not to let anyone disturb them, the family of 4 went inside the room that was usually used to rest. Chiyu asked his parents and sister to sit cross-legged on the bed. After thinking for a moment, he said, Later, you must stabilize your mind. No matter what happens, don't resist. Just quietly accept it. Also, Dad, Mom, you're a little old. Remember not to be too hasty when cultivating. Every time you cultivate in the future, it's best if you can be together. With the protection of the relic bead that I gave to Ying, you'll be much safer. After reminding his parents and sister, Chiyu asked them to close their eyes and calm their minds. Looking at his 3 relatives in this world, Chiyu revealed a warm smile because he had already thought of a way to help them awaken. Although they couldn't become strong like the Zodiac Guardian God warriors, they could at least use their bodies to absorb the energy molecules in the air to enhance their own strength. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted the energy in his body. During this period of cultivation, not only did his thundercloud force completely reach the 8-cloud realm, it also greatly improved his origin of nature energy. Although the improvement of origin of nature couldn't be seen on the surface, Chiyu could feel that under the situation of photosynthesis, origin of nature had already undergone a qualitative change. There was a huge improvement in all aspects of origin of nature. The 3 types of energy chosen by his parents and sister were the ones that he had reached the 8-cloud realm, so relatively speaking, it wouldn't consume too much energy. He just had to be careful during the process of awakening so that his powerful energy wouldn't harm their bodies. With the mentality that he didn't want to make mistakes, Chiyu began to control the energy. Green light emitted from his body. This was not the aura of origin of nature that was released during the joint cultivation, but the true origin of nature energy. That was Chiyu's origin of nature energy. The green light shone and slowly enveloped the bodies of Chi Tianlei and the other 2. The 3 of them were shocked at the same time, and their expressions became calmer. Under the effect of the origin of nature energy, their bodies began to be truly transformed. Chiyu wasn't in a hurry. While releasing energy, he pulled over a chair and sat down. Using his spiritual power, He carefully felt the changes in his parents' and sisters' bodies under the transformation of the origin of nature. At this time, the transformation of the origin of nature was much easier than before. After all, the three people Chi was facing were all ordinary people. In addition, the energy of his origin of nature was much stronger than before, so the transformation became much easier. Faint energy flickered. Every time Chi increased his energy, the effect of the transformation of the origin of nature would become better. To be cautious, he first strengthened the meridians of the three people. Then he slowly began to transform their internal organs, making them stronger. This way, when he injected energy later, it would be easier for them to accept it. As the range of the transformation of the origin of nature energy increased, Chi knew that it was time. Under the effect of the origin of nature, Chi Tianlei and the other two had entered a mysterious state of meditation. With Chi Yu's spiritual power control, they couldn't feel anything from the outside world at all. Chi raised his right hand and quickly slid his left hand across the meridian. Suddenly, blood burst out. Under the urging of his energy, a column of blood suddenly spurted out. Chi was already prepared. Under the effect of his earth-wind thundercloud force, the blood that spurted out was cleverly collected in mid-air so that it wouldn't fall to the ground and be wasted. That was Kiran's blood, after all. It was not inferior to any precious treasures of heaven and earth. Not only did it contain the energy of Kiran's bloodline, but also contained the energy of the origin of nature. Speaking of which, Chi's current body was probably not as strong as the legendary Tripitaka. However, his muscles, bones, and skin were extremely tough. Other than himself, if anyone else wanted to hurt his body, they would have to kill him first. However, in this world, how many people had the strength to kill Chi Yu? The blood split into 3 parts in the air and floated out. Under the clever control of the energy, Chi Tianlei, his wife, and Chi Yingying opened their mouths slightly. The blood flashed and entered their bodies. Chi Yu's face was a little pale. Even if he was the powerful king of the Zodiac, as long as he still had a human body, blood was the source of life. Losing 1/10 of his blood at once was not a small burden to him. However, he could not afford to relax at this moment. He circulated the origin of nature at full force, and under Chi Yu's control, his energy began to move in a frenzied rhythm. This time, with the Qilin blood as the foundation, he did not need to be as careful as before. A faint layer of silver light appeared on the surface of Chi Tianlei and the other two's bodies. At that time, it was Kiran's energy. The blood that Chi Yu gave them was not a bloodline, so they did not have Kiran's power. However, under the influence of the energy in Kiran's blood, their bodies had begun to be completely transformed. Chi Yu could clearly feel that the transformation speed of the three's bodies was rapidly increasing. He could not help but smile in satisfaction. If he did not use his blood, the transformation could still be carried out, but the effect would be much worse than now. Just now, he suddenly remembered that after he fed his blood to Ming Ming, Ming Ming's strength had greatly increased, so he thought of this method. His life was given by his parents, so what was wrong with giving some blood back to them? Perhaps it was because they were originally a family, and because their bloodlines were interlinked. When they received the energy from Chi Yu's blood, it was very smooth and there was not a trace of discomfort. The transformation had entered the most critical moment. The dark green light became more and more intense. Chi Yu urged his 3 types of thundercloud force to float out, and according to the choice of Chi Tianlei and the other 2, he quietly entered their bodies. Because there was no time to explain the cultivation method in detail to them, what Chi Yu needed to do now was to let them familiarize themselves with the direction and order of the energy circulation. With Chi Yu's powerful strength and the meridians in their bodies that had been transformed, the 3 different types of thundercloud force attacked the 8 extraordinary meridians in the bodies of Chi Tianlei and the other 2 at the same time. This time, it did not feel comfortable, and the 3 of them had varying degrees of pain on their faces. Among them, Ying Xiaoye's face had the least pain, because the water thundercloud force was the softest of the 4 types of thundercloud force. Although the impact was also strong, it felt much better. Chi Tianlei was second. The activity of the wind element made him suffer a lot. The one who suffered the most was Qi Yingying. The fire thundercloud force that she chose was a very violent energy, and the scorching airflow made her feel as if she had entered a furnace. It was as if magma was circulating in her body, and with every circulation, Qi Yingying would be drenched in sweat. Her clothes were completely soaked in sweat. Although Qi Yu could not bear it, he knew that this was a critical moment, and he must not stop. Otherwise, everything he had done before would be in vain. The beginning of their awakening was to leave a deep impression on them. At that moment, he used his mental strength to call out to the three of them to feel the direction of the energy circulation, while continuing to operate the three types of thundercloud force that had entered their bodies. Time went by, from afternoon to night. When the three types of thundercloud force had circulated in their bodies 49 times and completely opened up their 8 extraordinary meridians, Chiyu stopped the input of energy. Under the effect of the source of nature, Kirin's blood, and Kirin's thundercloud force, the bodies of Chi Tianlei and the other two could be said to have been completely reborn. A faint trace of energy had begun to circulate in their modified meridians, slowly absorbing the energy molecules in the air. A trace of faint energy had already begun to circulate in their modified meridians, slowly absorbing the energy molecules in the air. The three of them had entered a normal state of cultivation. As for the future effect, it would depend on their respective efforts. Of course, at this time, the three of them had entered a normal state of cultivation. Of course, at this time, it was still impossible for Chi Yu to teach them any skills. All skills required a huge amount of energy as a backing, and what they needed now was a process of condensing energy. What made Chi Yu gratified was that after the qualitative change, with the effect of the source of nature energy in Kirin's blood, his parents' bodies seemed to be no longer limited by their age after being modified. At this time, although they had sweated a lot because of the body modification just now, their parents seemed to have become a lot younger. Like Ying, they had smooth skin, and the surface of their skin was flowing with brilliance. At this time, they were no longer ordinary people. Quietly standing up, Chi Yu found a pen and paper and simply wrote down the things to pay attention to in cultivation and the cultivation method. He was not afraid of being seen by others. Those who had not undergone the initial awakening would not be of any use even if they saw these. 5 hours of wholehearted cultivation made Chi Yu feel a little tired. The output of energy was not large, but the consumption of blood had a certain impact on his body. It would at least take a whole day for the lost blood to fully recover. However, there was no time for him to delay now. Before the start of the mission, he had to go to Germany and England separately, and the distance between these two countries was not close. Quietly opening the window, Chi Yu took one last look at his parents and sister, deeply imprinting their appearance in the depths of his mind. Only then did he soar into the air and fly into the distance, at the same time wishing them well in his heart. No matter how difficult this mission was, even if he had to pay with his life, he must complete it. For the sake of his family and friends, Earth must not be destroyed. Chi Tianlei, Chi Yingying, and Ying Xiaodai did not wake up until the next morning. When they felt that their bodies were full of vitality and every inch of their muscles was full of strength, they all knew that they had changed. They were no longer ordinary people, and these were all given to them by Chi Yu. Feeling the faint salty taste in their mouths, they did not think that Chi Yu used the power of blood to help them transform. At this time, this was the only feeling in the hearts of Chi Tianlei and the other two. Their son had left again. When would he come back? Although they were close relatives, Chi Yu still gave them the feeling that he was like a mysterious dragon whose tail was nowhere to be seen. Sitting on little Peng's back, Chi Yu slowly gathered his energy. He decided to go to Germany first. After all, there might be changes in the Dark Parliament, and he might need more time to solve the problem. Therefore, he chose Germany. As long as the problem over there was resolved, it would be much easier to talk to Christie. Of course, he also thought of calling Christie, but after the Dracula castle was destroyed, he could no longer contact her. Regarding Christie's encounter, Chi was still somewhat worried, so he decided to go there personally. Sitting on little Peng's back, the light in Chi-Yu's eyes became much brighter. The energy consumed in his body had been completely recovered, and now all he needed was to wait for his blood to recover. The function of producing blood wasn't something that could be assisted by the source of nature. It was the human body's instinct. However, Chi-Yu was strong, and his body was different from ordinary people. By the time he arrived in Germany, he would be able to recover. Chi-Yu left, but all the countries in the world were operating at high speed. The impending global crisis forced all countries to abandon their prejudices against each other. No one wanted to die, nor did they want the world to be destroyed. For the sake of a common goal, the efficiency of the country's government agencies had increased by many times. This was what it meant to work wholeheartedly. Little Peng's flying speed was very fast, at least not slower than a Gulfstream 5. When the sun shone on the Earth the next day, Chi-Yu had already arrived on the other side of Earth, Berlin, Germany. Stepping on solid ground, Chi-Yu stretched his body and felt very comfortable. Although a night of cultivation still didn't allow his thundercloud force to break through the final calm. As he passed by the sea and absorbed a lot of water attribute energy molecules, he felt very comfortable all over. Now, the energy molecules of other attributes were just converted into the energy of the source of nature. Anyway, that was the energy of nature. Since he couldn't improve his thundercloud force, it would be good to improve his aura of nature. He still remembered the black beer and roasted pork knuckle in Germany. As soon as he entered the city of Berlin, he immediately found a place to eat. Although there was a certain problem with the language, after staying in Greece for so long, Chi-Yu could still complete simple English under Yama's guidance. At least, there was no problem in using it to eat. Since his strength reached a certain level, Chi-Yu no longer smoked and drank well. However, the mellow taste of a German beer was something he couldn't give up. Drinking the delicious black beer, Chi-Yu felt very comfortable all over his body. The energy in the beer was directly absorbed by his body. Coupled with the delicious roasted pork knuckle, Chi-Yu rarely had a big meal. While drinking, Chi-Yu thought about the problem between himself and Lung Er. During the battle on Tianxiang Mountain, Lung Er's performance clearly showed that she had a good impression of him. However, the main problem now didn't seem to be Lung Er. After all, although Lung Er's strength was not bad, there was still a certain gap compared to him. However, as Lung Er's guardian angel, the fallen angel Lucifer was very strong. Although he had made a lot of progress and obtained a divine artifact, it would still be very difficult to defeat him. After all, even Chi-Yu was inferior to Lucifer. Moreover, the Bull Demon King had gone overboard last time. It was impossible for Lucifer not to hate him. Therefore, if he wanted the Covenant of Darkness to participate in this mission wholeheartedly, the first thing he had to solve was the problem of Lung Er. The second thing he had to solve, which was also the most important, was the possible obstruction from Lucifer. Lucifer, I hope you don't do that. Otherwise, I will turn you, the fallen angel, into a death angel one day. Chapter 274. Chi-Yu didn't have to wait too long. When he finished his third bottle of black beer, a cold and somewhat surprised voice sounded beside him. Why are you here? Could it be that you changed your mind? Chi-Yu turned around and raised his mug of beer to Lung Er. He smiled and said, Do you want one? Lung Er sat beside Chi-Yu and asked for a bottle of beer. You still haven't answered my question. From the looks of it, Lung Er seemed to have become even more beautiful, but the gentleness in her eyes was much less than before. Instead, there was a hint of loneliness. Chi-Yu had a good impression of this Hell Princess. It was only because they were in a different social class, and he really didn't want to be entangled in a relationship, that he didn't pursue this beauty who was no less beautiful than Yamu. How do you expect me to answer? I really want to tell you that I've changed my mind, but I can't lie to you. I don't want to see your disappointed eyes. Chi-Yu said half-jokingly. Lung Er looked at him and said, Is that really what you think? I don't think so. If you really care about me, you wouldn't care about anything else. Chi-Yu sighed and said, If you want to say that, you should ask yourself first. Are you willing to give up your identity as the Princess of Hell for me? Lung Er's expression changed slightly. He said resolutely, That's impossible. There is no way we can outrun our father. Don't think that you can defeat Hell just because the powerhouse you summoned last time defeated Uncle Lucifer. Father's power is definitely not something your summoned creature can compare to. Chi-Yu smiled faintly and said, "Whatever you say. This time, I came in the hope of cooperating with you." It could be said that they were cooperating with Hell, but it could also be said that they were working with the Dark Parliament. I wonder if you're interested? Cooperate? How would they cooperate? Last time, I offered to cooperate with you, but you rejected me. Why? Are you regretting it now? Lungier looked at Chi-Yu amused. Chi-Yu's breathing became steadier, and the sorrow in his eyes seemed to be hidden deeper. As he drank his beer, he exuded the aura of a ruffian. It made people feel more approachable. Chi-Yu took a big gulp of beer and said, "It's different. The cooperation you proposed last time is something that I can't agree to because it goes against my principles. The cooperation that I propose this time is beneficial to both of us, and it is something that we must do. It won't affect our camps, so I don't think you have any reason to refuse. Isn't that right?" Lungier said indifferently, "Then tell me. I'll wait and see how you convince me." Chi-Yu said, "You should be the actual controller of the Dark Parliament right now. I don't believe that you don't know the crisis that Earth is about to face." Lungier's expression changed slightly. "Is that rumor true?" Chi-Yu was stunned for a moment and said, "You really don't know? Don't the members of the Dark Parliament have spies in various countries?" Lungier shook her head and said, "It's not that there aren't any, but it's very difficult to enter the core level. You should also know that there are believers of the Vatican everywhere, and they are very diligent in investigating and killing the Dark Parliament. It's easier said than done to sneak into the upper echelons of various countries. So, I only got some peripheral information, but I really can't believe that it's true." Chi-Yu said with a wry smile, "Don't say that you don't believe it. I didn't believe it either when I first learned about it. But the truth is in front of us. In less than 10 days, the asteroid that is 1/70 the size of Earth will arrive. At that time, I'm afraid that Hell won't have to come to this plane anymore, and Earth will never exist." Lungier looked at Chi-Yu, her eyes flashing with a complicated light. Chi-Yu didn't disturb her, minding his own business and drinking his black beer. He knew that the smart Lungier would definitely make the right choice. Lungier thought for a long time, and it was only after Chi-Yu finished his black beer that she spoke again. "Then how do you want us to cooperate now? I think you should also understand that it's impossible for us to cooperate on this matter. Let's not talk about the resistance of the leaders of various countries. Just look at the situation of the Dark Parliament now. The Dark Parliament indeed has the power to fight against the Vatican, but this is only a fight based on our energy-type fighting method. The asteroid is going to hit Earth. Is that a problem that we can solve? Do you think that you can stop the asteroid's arrival with just a few dozen or 100 strong people? That's too childish. Even a strong person of our level can't fight against it with the power of the universe. How to stop this asteroid from hitting Earth is basically a matter for the various countries' governments. The most I can do is to restrain my subordinates and not do anything harmful to society during this period of time, so that the various countries' governments can go all out to deal with the asteroid." A hint of admiration flashed in Chi-Yu's eyes. Although Lungier was objecting, her words had already told him that she was willing to cooperate. "Yes, what you said is correct. The real way to stop the asteroid is the alliance of various countries. But now, the problem has already appeared. Various countries need strong people to join them. I think you should have also received this news. It's just that the various governments haven't explained the specific situation. Since you're not completely clear about the real situation, let me tell you." Immediately, Chi-Yu told Lungier in detail about the various governments' plans after discussion, as well as the lack of intercontinental missiles and various other situations. After listening to Chi-Yu, Lungier fell into deep thought again. Lungier once again fell into deep thought. Chi-Yu's words were reasonable. Cooperation was beneficial to both sides. After all, if there was no Earth, how could Hell come? The importance of Earth to the infernal realm was immense. "I can consider your proposal, but time is too tight. I can't convince everyone in just a few days. Just like what you just said, the Vatican doesn't want us to join, and similarly, we don't want to cooperate with the Vatican. After all, they have been enemies for thousands of years. If they attacked him from behind, then The elites of our covenant of darkness will definitely suffer great losses. What should we do then? Chiyu said helplessly. What you're worried about is also what the Vatican is worried about. However, after reaching space, for the sake of a common goal, can't you put aside your hatred for a while? Even I can temporarily stop taking revenge on the church in Yumu. So why can't you do the same? Lung Air said, Chiyu, come with me to the Dark Parliament. You have to convince those guys before we can continue talking. Chiyu nodded. He said, all right. If they really don't agree, then on the day of Earth's destruction, they can just accept their bad luck. Although he didn't want to go to hell, Lung Air had already said it, so he definitely couldn't back down. The Covenant of Darkness wasn't weak. The Vatican could carry hundreds of nuclear bombs, so the Covenant of Darkness wouldn't be any weaker than them. Moreover, there was a super powerhouse like Lucifer in the Covenant of Darkness. With his participation, everything would be much easier. Walking on the streets of Berlin, Chiyu breathed in the fresh air. He said, Lung Air, how did you find me so quickly? Are you so sensitive to my aura? Lung Air said impatiently, who's sensitive to your aura? It's just that my subordinates sensed a very dangerous aura on you, so they came to the ice storm. When they described you, I naturally knew it was you. It was just that I couldn't believe it at that time, because in my memory, there didn't seem to be any reason for you to come. But I didn't expect it to be you. Chiyu chuckled. Are you pleasantly surprised? You think too highly of yourself. What kind of surprise can there be? Last time, you guys heavily injured Uncle Lucifer, and he only barely recovered in the past few days. Let me tell you, Uncle Lucifer hates you to the core. If not for you being able to summon that super powerhouse to fight for you, he might have already gone to take revenge on you. This time, you should have thought about it. The biggest obstacle isn't me, nor the guys from the Covenant of Darkness, but Uncle Lucifer. Although he's my guardian angel in name, his status in hell is much higher than mine. When that time comes, I might not be able to protect you. It's not too late to regret it now. Chiyu smiled and said, Do I look like someone who regrets? Lung Air made a face at Chiyu and said, I hope you regret it. Chiyu naturally knew what she was referring to. He sighed and said, Looks like we can only wait for our next life. Lung Air smiled mysteriously and said, That might not be the case. Chiyu looked at Lung Air in surprise, but he didn't say anything else. He sensed the condition of his body and found that the blood he lost had basically been replenished. What he was about to face was not only a challenge of strength, but also a test of his wisdom. One could imagine how difficult it would be to convince a fallen angel who had 3 wings cut off by the bull demon king he released. However, Chiyu wasn't discouraged because of this. If he really couldn't do it, he would not rely on the power of the Covenant of Darkness. Moreover, he believed that no matter how deep Lucifer's hatred for him was, he wouldn't dare to put his hatred on the same level as hell's interests. Lung Air seemed very quiet as she walked with Chiyu. Her gaze had also regained its gentleness, but it seemed like she was thinking about something in the depths of her pink eyes. A faint light flashed, and she placed her hands in front of her, no longer paying attention to Chiyu. Miss Lung Air, should we change our way to the Covenant of Darkness? If we walk like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach it by nightfall, Chiyu asked tentatively. He had a good impression of Lung Air. At least, he treated the girl in front of him as a friend. Lung Air glanced at Chiyu, and that faint flirtatious look made Chiyu stunned. Then how do you want to go? I haven't been feeling well recently, so I can't fly. Chiyu thought to himself, you can't fly? If you can't fly, then why did you come here so quickly? Are you in Berlin to begin with? Although he thought so, he obviously couldn't say out loud. He could only ask, Then how do we go? Why don't we take a car? Lung Air said angrily, With my identity, do you think I will take a car? I can't fly, but can't you fly with me? You're so stingy. I'm not heavy. Chiyu glanced at Lung Air's slender figure and smiled bitterly. All right then, I'll fly with you. As he spoke, he looked around to find a dark corner so that he could unleash the effects of his Qilin stealth. Lung Air said, You have to make it clear that you can't use your energy to carry me. Otherwise, what if you don't have enough energy and I fall? Chiyu was stunned for a moment. That can't be. Unless I'm hit by a nuclear bomb, you know how strong I am. Lung Air said coquettishly, I don't care. Anyway, You can't use your energy to carry me. That's too estranged. I don't like it." As they spoke, they had already walked to the gap between two shops on the side of the street. Before Chi could react, Long Air was already beside him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and giggled. "Let's do this." Feeling her soft body, Chi wasn't a man if he said he wasn't tempted. He looked at Long Air awkwardly, but Long Air gave him a determined look. With no other choice, Chi could only activate his Qilin concealment and shroud the two of them within. He floated up and flew in the direction of the Dark Parliament. "You're a dead man. Can't you hug me a little more? What if I let go?" Long Air said unhappily. "This all right. Since things had already come to this, Chi might as well compromise." However, when his arms wrapped around Long Air's slender and flexible waist, their bodies couldn't help but touch even more closely. It was an indescribable feeling. It even made Chi forget about the problems he might face when he arrived at the Dark Parliament. There was a faint fragrance on Long Air's body. It wasn't the smell of perfume, but an extremely unique and mysterious fragrance. Chi could clearly feel his heartbeat quicken as he stared at that lovable face that was inches away from him. Leaning into Chi arms, Long Air's arms around his neck tightened. She made herself and Chi body even closer. She leaned her head on his shoulder, looking like she was enjoying it. Her full breasts were completely pressed against Chi solid chest. Waves of strange feelings constantly attacked Chi body and mind. "Miss Long Air, can you not be so close?" "Why? Are you still a virgin? Why can't I see it? You saw my body before, and I didn't say anything. Why are you pretending?" "Oh, right. The last time I went to Yin Huang, I seem to have heard the people in the capital say that it's hard to act cool." You even know how to pretend?" Long Air giggled. "Why? Can't I know? Acting cool means that you want it very much, but you pretend that you don't want it." This, Chi was really speechless. He wished he could teleport to the Dark Parliament. But when he really brought Long Air to the small hill where the door to the Dark Parliament was, he suddenly felt a little disappointed. It seemed like it would have been better if the process had taken longer. It seemed like Long Air was right. He really seemed to be pretending. She reluctantly let go of her arms. Looking at Chi silly look, Long Air giggled. "Why? You still can't bear to let go? Why don't I go back to Yin Huang with you?" Chi was shocked. He hurriedly let go of her arms and said awkwardly, "Miss Long Air, a man's self-control is limited. Moreover, you know our situation. If you're not afraid that your dad will kill me, then I don't care." Long Air looked at Chi quietly. "Is this your only worry?" Chi was stunned. He didn't know how to answer her. Long Air turned to face the void in front of her. A faint pink light floated out from her body. Her right hand brushed the space in front of her lightly, and a black door opened quietly. Turning back to look at Chi, she said, "Let's go." Chi floated up and entered the black door with Long Air. This was his second time coming to the Dark Parliament. The sudden appearance of the dark energy still gave Chi a great sense of pressure. He subconsciously reined in his thoughts. His spiritual power mixed with the energy of the source of nature to form a layer of protection on the surface of his skin, preventing the dark energy from affecting him. This time, he followed Long Air into the Dark Parliament. Chi didn't need to hide his body anymore. As soon as they entered the space, they were immediately discovered by the dark warriors guarding the area. Immediately, a group of people surrounded them. The leader of the group, a dark warrior with a ruby embedded on his chest, knelt on one knee and said a few words to Long Air in German. Long Air wasn't as gentle to the dark warriors as she was to Chi. She only grunted and didn't even look at these low-level subordinates. She took Chi and floated up. They flew towards Hell City. She no longer said that she couldn't fly. Under the illumination of the violet sun, the two of them flew over the blood-red moat and the gray-white city walls, directly entering Nether City. As soon as they entered, they immediately passed by a few higher-ranked dark liches leading the way. They only dared to lead the way from the side, not even daring to look at Long Air. Long Air said a few words to the dark liches in German. Immediately, one of them sped up and flew towards the inner city. On the other hand, Long Air brought Chi directly to the tallest building in the inner city before stopping. I've asked them to call the Dark Chancellor and the Dark Warrior Emperor over. In this world of darkness, we only need to ask for their opinion. If it weren't for the fact that I can't confirm Uncle Lucifer's intentions, we wouldn't even need to call them over. Chiyu naturally understood the authority of this princess of hell. However, he couldn't help but ask, I heard that there are a total of 13 members in the Dark Parliament. Don't they even have the right to vote? Lung Air snorted disdainfully. What right to vote? This is the Dark World, not the Vatican. As long as you have absolute power, then you will have the absolute right to speak. I'm sure you understand this point. Here, other than Uncle Lucifer and I, only the 3 fellows who could summon the Dreadlord had the right to speak. As for the others, unless they have a death wish, do you think they will say anything? Hearing Lung Air's words, Chiyu couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Indeed, no matter how good his impression of Lung Air was, she was still from hell. There are many things that couldn't be considered with common sense. Lung Air, do you still remember the Dracula family? It's the Dracula family that was destroyed by the Vatican last time. How are they doing now? Lung Air turned her head to look at Chiyu and said, the Dracula family is now in the process of rebuilding. No matter what, they suffered heavy losses last time and even killed many experts from the Vatican. Of course, I know that it was all done by you, but for your sake, I'll give all the credit to them. After you left, I ordered the Dark Lich to send some people to help the Dracula family reactivate the hidden domain of the ancient castle. As for when they will be able to recover, that's not something I know. The current head of the Dracula family should be Klinsmann's sister, that girl from the east. After hearing Lung Air's words, Chiyu couldn't help but feel relieved. As long as the Dracula family still existed, nothing would happen to Christie. Chiyu's heart was filled with remorse for Klinsmann's death, and he could only repay this remorse with Christie. Moreover, he and Christie, who was still Su Qing, were more or less friends. Both of them entered the spire. This wasn't the residence of the Dark Chairman, as Chiyu had imagined. Instead, it was an extremely spacious hall with a huge statue enshrined in the innermost part of the hall. The entire statue was shrouded in a layer of black mist and could only be vaguely seen. The statue had 12 black wings. Without a doubt, Chiyu knew that this statue represented Lung Air's father, the great demon King Satan, the ruler of hell. In the center of the hall, there was a long European-style table. The table was very large, but there were only 13 single sofas around the table. Even the sofas were covered with black leather. The entire hall exuded a gloomy feeling. In the middle of the hall, there was a purple crystal ball hanging in the air. The energy fluctuations of the purple crystal were very strong. It seemed to have an unusual relationship with the purple sun outside. The entire hall was filled with a lavender luster. Lung Air saw Chiyu staring at the purple crystal in the air. She smiled and said, the main energy source of this hell city is actually hell. I'm not afraid to tell you that this is the exit of hell. It's just that due to various reasons, hell hasn't come to the human world yet. But this time won't be long. The purple sun you see outside is just a fake one. The real purple sun only exists in hell. That is the energy source of the entire hell. Only under the cover of the purple sun, whether it is dark creatures or dark plants, can grow better. Just as she said this, the respectful voice of the Dark Chairman sounded from outside. Your Royal Highness. The smile on Lung Air's face disappeared. She walked to the main seat and sat down. Come in. The door opened. The Dark Chairman and the Dark Warrior Emperor walked in front. Behind them, there were 4 Dark Liches. The leader was the Dark Lich who could summon the Dreadlord last time. A faint light flickered, although they walked in with their heads down. But when they entered the hall, their eyes subconsciously saw Chiyu next to Lung Air. Lung Air had already sat down. Chiyu was naturally also sitting, and the position he sat in was where the Dark Chairman usually sat. Seeing the appearance of Chiyu, the eyes of these Dark Council leaders couldn't help but change. The heroic appearance of Chiyu last time, when he defeated the Dreadlord alone, was still deeply imprinted in their memories. Seeing this Easterner again, they couldn't help but have some strange thoughts. Lung Air waved her hand and said, All right, you all sit down. I called you here today because I have something important to inform you. The Dark Chairman saw that Chi Yu was sitting in his seat. In front of Lung Er, he naturally couldn't take it back, so he could only sit down with the others. He respectfully asked, "Your Royal Highness, may I know what it is that would trouble you to personally summon us?" Lung Er said, "Perhaps you have also received some news. Now, I have a definite answer. The asteroid is about to hit the Earth, and it is much more dangerous than we thought." As soon as this statement came out, whether it was the Dark Chairman or the Dark Warrior Emperor, their faces couldn't help but stiffen. Although they are creatures of darkness and have never considered themselves as humans, they still live on this earth after all. Just as Chi Yu predicted, these creatures of darkness also don't want their families to be destroyed. The Dark Warrior Emperor said in a low voice, "Your Royal Highness, what should we do now? What will happen if the asteroid hits the Earth?" Lung Er replied very naturally, "Simple. There was a bang, and everything was gone." The Dark Chairman and the Dark Warrior Emperor looked at each other, speechless for a while. Of course, they all know that Lung Er doesn't belong to this plane. Even if the Earth is destroyed, she can escape back to hell. But what about them? "Your Royal Highness, then can you lead us to hide under the protection of His Majesty Satan for a period of time? If the Earth isn't destroyed, then we can come back." The Dark Chairman tentatively asked. Lung Er snorted disdainfully. "Who do you think you are? Do you think you can go to hell just because you say you want to? Although you are my father's followers, you are just my father's representatives in this world. You don't belong to the true scope of hell. Don't say that I don't want to. Even if I agree to let you go, you can't pass through the barrier of the plane. It's not something that you can pass through." As soon as they heard this, the Dark Chairman and the other Dark Council's faces couldn't help but change. The longer they live, the more they fear death. Seeing the crisis approaching, their hearts couldn't help but become anxious. But with Lung Er's identity and strength, what else can they do? For a time, they could only look at Lung Er anxiously. Chi Yu, who was watching coldly from the side, couldn't help but secretly praise in his heart. Lung Er first told them about the crisis, and then said that she would stay out of it. As long as they don't want the Earth to be destroyed, then all the problems would be much easier to solve. Sure enough, Lung Er said, "I originally didn't want to get involved in this matter. The survival of the Earth has no effect on us. However, this Mr. Chi who just came from the East moved me. He is my friend. This time, he came in the hope of cooperating with the Dark Council. As for whether he agrees or not, I don't care. You can discuss it among yourselves." As soon as the Dark Chairman heard this, his eyes suddenly turned to Chi Yu and asked in a deep voice, "Mr. Chi, I don't know what you mean by cooperation. Is it related to asteroids?" Chi Yu nodded and said, "Of course it's related to asteroids. Otherwise I wouldn't have come all the way here." The Dark Chairman sneered. "That is the power of the universe. It is absolutely not something that can be stopped by humans. Mr. Chi, forgive me for being presumptuous, but do you want us to use our own energy to shake that asteroid? That is absolutely impossible. It's like the dragonfly shaking a stone pillar. It's absolutely impossible." Chi Yu said with confidence, "Of course it's not a dragonfly shaking a stone pillar. It's like this." Immediately, he briefly described what he said to Lung Er before. "That's why we need the help of the Dark Council. Although your power may not be able to play a big role, having more backup nuclear bombs will always increase the safety of the Earth." This time, I didn't have too much hope. The Holy See also unanimously opposed it. However, I still came. As a human, I absolutely can't see my own world being destroyed. If you don't want to see it, then we have a lot of opportunities to cooperate, isn't it? Chapter 275. After a while, the Dark Speaker said, "Mr. Chi, we are also very willing to do our part to protect the Earth. After all, although we have been living in the dark world, we are still a part of the Earth. We are duty-bound to protect the Earth. But how can you convince me that everything you said is true? As the leader of the Dark Parliament, I have to consider all the subordinates who survive in the dark world." Chi Yu looked at the Dark Speaker and smiled. "This is simple. Aren't you afraid of the Vatican? I promise that as long as you work hard to protect the Earth in this cooperation, then during the whole process of the mission, you will not receive any unfair treatment. As the representative of the Yanwang Republic, and also the representative of the entire East, I can let your Dark Parliament team join the Guardian of the East of the Yanwang Republic. In this way, you don't need to contact the people of the Vatican at all. I also believe that with my strength, I can completely protect the people of the Dark Parliament." The Dark Warrior Emperor snorted coldly and said, "What a big tone. Yes, your strength is indeed not weak. However, being able to defeat the Dread Fiend with less than 40% of his strength does not prove that you can resist the entire Vatican. Who knows if you're a spy sent by the Vatican?" Chi Yu's eyes flashed coldly. "Who told you that I am alone? Who told you that I can't resist the entire Vatican? In the East, I am just one of the Guardians of the East. My companions, each of them has great strength." At this time, Lung Er on the side said, "As for the relationship between the Vatican and Chi Yu, I can prove it. The hatred between him and the Vatican is irreconcilable. If it wasn't for this mission, the Guardians of the East would not cooperate with the Vatican. I will show you something, and you will know." While saying, Lung Er clasped her hands in front of her chest, and a pink light bloomed from her chest. The light condensed into a beam of light and shone on the purple crystal above the hall. After being refracted, the purple light changed into a light curtain in the air. In the flickering light, a blurry image appeared on the light screen. On the screen was the scene of Chi Yu fighting 4 cardinals in the suburbs of London to avenge Klinsmann. The entire scene began with Ming Ming's final battle with the Angel of Light, Raphael, and how Chi Yu came to London. How he watched his elder brother perish in the hands of the church's red-robed archbishops. How his lover was severely injured by the Angel of Flames and Flames Raphael, and how he demonized and defeated the 4 red-robed archbishops one by one. The final scene was the scene of Xuan Yuan's soul activating the God Executioner Array with his own power source. Even through the image, one could clearly feel the tyrannical energy of the huge group of golden light swords. Instant destruction. The 3 archangels joined forces and did not have the slightest possibility of resisting. Even if they only had a part of their strength, it was enough to prove how powerful Chi Yu was. Perhaps because Lung Er was afraid of evoking the pain in Chi Yu's heart, she did not release the later scenes of him in Yama's entanglement. But the previous scenes were enough to prove how irreconcilable the relationship between Chi Yu and the Holy See was. The Dark Speaker was obviously relieved and said, "Since Her Royal Highness is a guarantor, we believe in Mr. Chi regarding the Holy See. As for the specific details of the cooperation, I don't know what Mr. Chi has in mind. Your suggestion just now is very good. Let's join the Guardians of the East. No matter what the mission is, the Holy See will always be our enemy. We can't cooperate with them." Chi Yu smiled indifferently and said, "Of course, the Holy See also doesn't want to cooperate with you. But now that things have come to this point, there is no more time to discuss it. If you think you can cooperate and work hard for the existence of the Earth, then in a few days, you will follow me to the United States." The Dark Speaker said, "We need to think about it. How about this? 3 days later, I will give Mr. Chi an answer." Chi nodded and said, "Well, 3 days, I only have 3 days. When I come back, I hope to get a positive answer from you. Time waits for no man. Think about it carefully. If we let that asteroid attack our Earth, what kind of scene would that be? Everything will no longer exist. There is no need to think about it. There is a way to heaven, but you don't want to go to hell. Boy, do you still expect to leave here alive today?" A cold voice sounded from all directions in the hall. With a flash of light, a tall figure appeared in the hall. Chi Yu had practically left his seat in an instant, and the chair he had been sitting on had already silently turned to ashes. That's right, it was Lucifer. His appearance couldn't help but make Lung Er's beautiful face turn pale. She hurriedly took a few steps forward, wanting to stop Lucifer. Lucifer shouted in a low voice, pushed Lung Er away, and instantly teleported to Chi Yu's side and directly punched Chi Yu's chest. Ever since he was born, even when he betrayed the Protoss and defected to Satan, he had never suffered such a great humiliation. His 3 wings were broken. Not only did he suffer physical pain, but it was also a huge blow to Lucifer's spirit. The feeling of helplessness and fear had long been buried deep in his heart. Suddenly feeling Chi Yu's aura, how could he not be angry? So he directly attacked Chiyu without saying anything. Chiyu was already prepared for Lucifer's appearance. Since he came here today, he was not afraid of the other party. Seeing that Lucifer's fist was about to reach his chest with surging dark energy, Chiyu did not dodge. A circle of gentle, five-colored light lit up from his chest and instantly enveloped his body. In an instant, it enveloped his body. Lucifer's fist, which contained an incomparably huge amount of energy, pierced through his chest. With a loud bang, the entire building trembled violently. A large hole with a diameter of 3 meters and an unknown depth had appeared on the ground behind Chiyu. Ling'er exclaimed. Just as she was about to rush over, she felt that something was wrong. This was because Chiyu was still standing there, while Lucifer, who was in a rage, was stunned. Chiyu's aura was no weaker than Lucifer's as he calmly looked at his opponent. Lucifer's fist was still passing through his chest, but no matter how one looked at it, Chiyu's aura was not inferior to Lucifer's. No matter how one looked at it, it did not cause any damage to Chiyu. Lucifer, you are indeed a fallen angel. You repay kindness with enmity so naturally. I really admire you. Chiyu clapped his hands as if Lucifer's fist was not on him at all. Lucifer felt that special energy fluctuations were constantly generated around Chiyu's arm. Although he could not determine what the energy was, it constantly made him feel a sense of fear. He subconsciously retracted his arm and looked at Chiyu coldly. What kindness do you have for me? The hatred of my broken wings is absolutely irreconcilable. Chiyu looked at him contemptuously. What? Absolutely irreconcilable? If I wanted to destroy you that day, do you think that you would just have a broken wing? I gave you a chance because of Ling'er. I didn't expect you to be so ignorant. In that case, it seems that I don't have to give Ling'er face anymore. Why don't I send you back to heaven today? Lucifer gradually calmed down after listening to Chiyu's words. Ignoring the bizarre scene in front of him, Chiyu's memories of that battle had already been evoked. Yes, could he kill the person in front of him? He had been so powerful back then. In particular, the giant creature with 2 horns that he had summoned had made him unable to resist it at all. He had just recovered from his serious injuries. If he summoned that powerhouse again, what should he do? Chiyu faintly smiled. Although he was smiling, the aura exuding from his body was completely different. After this period of cultivation, the energy in his body had greatly increased. Coupled with the protection of the Kantong seal, his strength hadn't just increased by a little. Otherwise, he would not have been so bold as to come here today to negotiate. Incomparably sharp energy seeped out of Chiyu's body, and a faint metallic luster appeared on the surface of his skin. That golden luster was not divine, but the sharp energy was still fresh in Lucifer's memory. Chiyu said calmly, Lucifer, actually, you only need to calculate the odds of victory and defeat between us. If you still remember what happened that day, you should be able to calculate that with my current strength. I should have no problem resisting the people of the Covenant of Darkness and Ling'er for a short period of time. But what about you? How long can you last against the Demon Bull King? There is no one here who can help you. There will only be one ending for you. I didn't kill you that day, but that doesn't mean I don't want to. I only left you alive because of Ling'er. I'm here to negotiate today on behalf of the entire Earth. If you want to fight me or stop me, we can just stop the negotiations and solve the problem between us. Let's see if you kill me, or if I pull out all your wings. Lucifer's eyes flickered as he looked at Chiyu, the fierceness in his eyes growing even stronger. However, Chiyu knew very well that the fellow in front of him was just putting up a strong front. Otherwise, he wouldn't just look at him and not make a move. Was he afraid of death? As long as he was afraid of death, did the fallen angel go to hell for freedom? If that was the case, freedom also came with the prerequisite of life. For a strong person like Lucifer, he was even more afraid of death. Ling'er was naturally more familiar with Lucifer than Chiyu. She glanced at the people of the Covenant of Darkness and said, Okay, you can go out first. There is just a small misunderstanding between Uncle Lucifer and Chiyu. As for the matter just now, you don't have to think about it anymore. It's up to Uncle Lucifer to decide. If you decide to cooperate in the end, Uncle Lucifer will be your guide. In this way, You don't have to worry about anything. What did the chairman of the Covenant of Darkness dare to say? In front of the fallen angel Lucifer, they were really too insignificant. Even the three dreadlords that they had summoned were nothing more than subordinates in front of Lucifer. The leader of the Darkness faction hurriedly bowed to Lucifer and Lung before leaving with his men. Chiyu knew that Lung was leaving Lucifer some face, afraid that he would fight to the death because of the Dark Lord subordinates. He couldn't help but secretly feel grateful. Girl, you cooperated really well. In fact, his threat to Lucifer was not wrong. However, the strength of the Bull Demon King was also a double-edged sword for him. Once the conditions he promised him were used up, then all the problems would appear. The remaining two conditions could only be used at the most crucial moment. With a faint smile, Chiyu said, "How about it? Shall we sit down and talk?" "Your Excellency, Lucifer." Lucifer looked coldly at Chiyu. "What is there to talk about between us?" Chiyu said, "Of course there is. First of all, my negotiation this time is definitely a good thing for you. Your Excellency Lucifer, I just want to ask you a question. If Earth is destroyed and you return to hell, how will His Majesty Satan treat you?" I didn't say it in front of the Dark Lord just now. If I'm not wrong, although you're in another plane, your plane is dependent on Earth. Not bad, right? This time, whether it was Lung or Lucifer, they were stunned. For them, this was definitely one of the biggest secrets of hell. The two looked at Chiyu with flickering eyes. Even Lung the gentleness in her eyes was no longer there, as if she was thinking about something. Chiyu spread out his hands and said, "What? You want to kill me to silence me? Do you think you can do it? I know far more than you can imagine. Whether it is your hell, or the source of the Greek guardians and the source of the Vatican's power, heaven. In fact, they all rely on Earth to survive. Once the Earth was destroyed, in that case, your planes won't be able to exist for too long. At that time, I'm afraid that even a powerhouse like His Majesty Satan will have to travel endlessly in the universe with his tail between his legs. As for whether he can survive, I don't know." Lucifer looked at Chiyu. The energy fluctuations on his body became more and more intense. A formless killing intent locked onto Chiyu's body. He was unable to speak for a long time. After a while, it was Lung who broke the silence. "Chiyu, tell me, how did you know?" Chiyu smiled. "This is a secret, my adorable Miss Lung. First, you must understand that, as the Guardian of the East, I will know many things. I also believe that our Eastern Guardian will be the strongest among all the Guardians in the world. Now, we can calm down and talk about the cooperation. What do you think?" Ever since he knew the origin of the world's myths, Chiyu had carefully considered the situation in the East and the West. This time, if he wasn't more than 80% confident, he wouldn't have come. He relied not only on the desire of the people in the Covenant of Darkness to survive, but also because of Hell's reliance on Earth. Since the so-called planes originated from Earth, it was just that they were sealed at different levels by the gods of water and fire. In that case, once Earth disappeared, could they still exist? The answer was of course no. Lucifer slowly sat down and kept thinking about Chiyu's words. Chiyu's judgment directly stabbed into Hell's Achilles heel. He was on Earth. If Earth was really destroyed, he would be there. What would Satan think? Especially since Lung also knew what had happened. Once she reported to Satan that it was because she didn't help humans and sought the destruction of Earth. Would Satan let her off? Chiyu wasn't in a hurry. He sat there quietly and waited for Lucifer's answer. His gaze turned to Lung. Looking at a beauty was much better than looking at a demon who wanted to kill him at any time. In fact, ever since he saw Lung and told her what had happened, he had already confirmed that his judgment was correct. Lung was the princess of Hell. If it wasn't for the fact that the destruction of Earth would affect Hell, even if she had a good impression of him, she definitely wouldn't have agreed so easily. The murderous glint in Lucifer's eyes gradually faded. He hated Chiyu. He hated the Bull Demon King even more. However, under such circumstances, he had no choice but to temporarily put aside his personal grudges. It was the same reason why Chiyu wouldn't seek revenge on the Vatican and Yumu. Under such circumstances, he finally compromised. "All right, I won't stand in the way of this matter. Everything will be decided by Her Highness." After saying this, he stood up, and a black shadow flashed. He had already floated out of the hall. The issue of face still made it impossible for him to face Chiyu. After Lucifer left, Chiyu couldn't help but secretly let out a sigh of relief. Without this huge obstacle, everything would be much easier. He smiled at Lumiere and said, "Miss Lumiere, how about it? Now we can cooperate, right? I'm going to London now to pick up Christy. When I come back, we'll set off for America together. What do you think?" Lumiere looked at Chiyu with a faint smile. "You really know too much. No wonder Uncle Lucifer wants to kill you. If one day, when hell comes, I wonder if you can still protect your life in front of my father?" Chiyu laughed and said, "Let's talk about that when the time comes. I don't know if His Majesty Satan will let me go. But if Earth is destroyed, then it's not a matter of who will let who go. All right, I'll leave first." After saying this, he stood up and was about to walk out. Wait a minute. Lumiere floated up and blocked in front of Chiyu. She looked at him with a burning gaze and said, "Did I say that I would agree?" Chiyu was stunned and said, "Didn't we already agree before?" Lumiere smiled and said, "Who said that? I just said that we would discuss it here. I asked you to ask Uncle Lucifer for his opinion. But you heard it just now. Uncle Lucifer gave up his right to decide and gave it to me. I haven't agreed to participate in this operation of your human race." Chiyu looked at Lumiere and couldn't help but be a little stunned. He really couldn't think of any reason why Lumiere would stop this cooperation. From any point of view, cooperation would be beneficial to both sides. "Miss Lumiere, you're not joking with me, are you?" Lumiere said with a straight face. "Who's joking with you? Don't forget that I'm the princess of hell. As long as I don't agree, I'm afraid no one here would dare to agree to cooperate with you. After all, compared to dying when Earth is destroyed or dying now, I think it's easier for them to make the decision." Looking at Lumiere's serious expression, Chiyu's face sank. "Then what do you want?" Lumiere looked at Chiyu with a sly glint in her eyes. She smiled and said, "It's very simple. I can agree to it, but you have to agree to 2 conditions. As long as you agree to them, I will agree to this cooperation." Chiyu frowned and asked, "What conditions?" Lumiere said, "First, from now on, you can't call me Miss Lumiere. You have to call me by my name like when we first met. Of course, I won't object if you want to call me Sister Lumiere." Chiyu looked at her helplessly and thought to himself, "You call this a condition, Sister Lumiere? Although you look younger than me, only God knows how old you, the princess of hell, the daughter of Satan, are." However, there was no reason for Chiyu to reject such a simple condition. He nodded and said, "No problem, Sister Lumiere." Lumiere's eyes regained their gentleness. Looking at Chiyu's helpless expression, she didn't know why, but she felt a special pleasure in her heart. "Then let's talk about the second condition. Do you still remember what I told you in the Yinhuang Republic?" Chiyu's expression changed. "You're not asking me to marry you, are you? You know, that's impossible. Not to mention the others, you have a lot of problems on your side. If you really want to force me to do that, let's not talk about this cooperation." Seeing that Chiyu was about to explode, Lumiere snapped, "Do you think I care? Don't tell me that I can't get married except for you." Chiyu's eyes lit up. "So it's not that condition?" Lumiere looked at Chiyu's excited expression and couldn't help but feel bitter in her heart. She lowered her head and said with tears in her eyes, "So I'm so annoying. So you don't like Lumiere that much? Am I really that ugly?" The tearful Lumiere's killing power undoubtedly increased exponentially. Looking at her helpless expression, how could Chiyu harden his heart? He hurriedly smiled and said, "How can that be? Sister Lumiere, you're so beautiful. You're also the daughter of the great demon king Satan. You can be said to be a proud daughter of heaven. It's me who doesn't deserve you. If there weren't so many factions between us, I would have agreed to your conditions a long time ago." It was true that Lumiere was beautiful and extremely attractive, but Chiyu was currently lying. After last time's setback, it could be said that he was wholeheartedly devoted to his few remaining female confidants. He absolutely did not want to increase the number of his harem and hurt the hearts of his beloved girls. Hearing Chiyu's words, Lumiere's tears turned into a smile. He said, "At least you still have some conscience. I also know that our factions decide many things. What I said to you last time was indeed too impulsive. Father aside, even Uncle Lucifer wouldn't agree to us being together, unless you're willing to join our hell faction. But I also know that you can't give up everything for me. My second condition is also very easy. It won't affect your faction, nor will it affect anything else. I just hope that after you complete this mission and after Earth is saved, you'll be able to return to Earth. You and I could be husband and wife for a day. Silence, absolute silence. Looking at Lung-Er, Chi-Yu could not believe that she would propose such a condition. Although the second condition sounded as childish as the first, the difference was like heaven and earth. Chi-Yu knew his own personality very well. If something really happened between him and Lung-Er, even if he didn't form an alliance with Hell in the future, he would at least have some reservations in his heart when facing the Hell faction. Looking at Lung-Er, he could not help but fall silent, because he didn't know how to answer. If he rashly refused, not to mention the cooperation this time, it would probably cause a huge blow to Lung-Er. As the Princess of Hell, she put down her dignity to propose such a condition. Chi-Yu didn't dare to imagine what kind of reaction she would have if he rejected her. Lung-Er looked at Chi-Yu, and her beautiful eyes gradually turned red. Chi-Yu, are you a man or not? Even I can put down everything and make such a shameless request. Can't you sacrifice a little for me? Don't worry. Lung-Er, and the daughter of Satan, I won't pester you or anything. There's a saying in the East that it doesn't matter if the world lasts forever, it only matters what you once had. Don't tell me you're not even willing to give me the opportunity that you once had. Is your heart harder than the black rocks of hell? I've said it. The struggle in his heart finally gave way to his emotions. After hearing Lung-Er's mournful words, Chi-Yu could no longer suppress the emotions in his heart. He took a step forward and tightly embraced Lung-Er, tightly hugging her fragrant body. I promise you. After saying this, Chi-Yu suddenly let go of Lung-Er and rushed out of the hall as fast as he could. The sharp energy of a Xin Yuan sword easily broke through this imitation hell realm, allowing Chi-Yu to leave this place that was filled with darkness energy. Looking at the direction Chi-Yu left, the sadness in Lung-Er's eyes gradually disappeared. Her beautiful eyes revealed a trace of a playful smile, and she muttered to herself, Chi-Yu, Chi-Yu, you're still the same as before. Even though Yama dealt you a heavy blow, you still couldn't control your feelings. In the end, you still can't get out of my palm. I, the Princess of Hell, saw Lung-Er. Am I that easy to refuse? As she said that, she fiercely clenched her palm, and her eyes turned completely pink. Dark Speaker, come in. The Dark Speaker floated into the hall, looked at Lung-Er, who was releasing an evil aura, and said respectfully, Your Royal Highness, what are your orders? Lung-Er said lightly, Pass my order. Select the elites from the Dark Parliament, mainly the Dark Warriors. You and Dark Warrior Huang Emperor will lead the team, a total of 1,000 of the most outstanding people, and prepare to set off at any time. This time, I will personally lead the team with Uncle Lucifer. For the existence of the Earth, and for the future invasion of Hell, this time we must help humanity solve the problem of the asteroid. Yes, Your Royal Highness. Hearing Sa Lung-Er's words, the Dark Speaker couldn't help but sigh in relief. He was most afraid that Lung-Er would refuse Chi-Yu. He didn't want to die. Wait a minute. Lung-Er stopped the Dark Speaker who was about to leave and continued. At the same time, you give the order. During the course of this operation, everyone will listen to my orders. Whether it is the Guardian of the East or the people of the Holy See, we can't have any conflicts with them. Everything is focused on this mission. Do you understand? The Dark Speaker, of course, knew that this operation was definitely not the time to give up, so he hurriedly agreed, and then respectfully retreated. Lucifer quietly appeared beside Lung-Er. Your Royal Highness, how are you going to deal with this Easterner? Sa Lung-Er sighed and said, Uncle Lucifer, you have also seen how outstanding this human is. Compared to the last time, the speed of his progress is simply unimaginable. What my father admires the most is talent. That's why you were willing to join our hell camp. This time's matter is no longer something we can solve. This Easterner, leave it to my father to deal with. I hope he has a way to truly subdue him. After all, he is the only man in my life that has moved my heart. I really hope that he can stay in hell with me forever." Although Lucifer did not show it on the surface, he was secretly shocked. One must know that even the great demon king Satan did not always exist. Every 10,000 years, the great demon king Satan would have a chance to be replaced. The original great demon king would die, and his direct bloodline would inherit his position, becoming the new great demon king. The fusion of souls made Satan immortal, and the princess of hell in front of him was obviously the successor of the next great demon king Satan. However, the meaning of her words just now seemed to be telling him, if that Easterner was willing to surrender to hell, then it was very likely that after Salung married him, their child, or the Easterner himself, would be the successor of the next Satan. Thinking of this, Lucifer could not help but shiver. He had once wanted to destroy him, and if it was really as he guessed, then once this Easterner came to power in hell, it would probably be his end. Thinking of this, Lucifer had already started to plan in his heart. Chapter 276. Although there was still some time before the asteroid hit Earth, he wasn't sure if the Dark Parliament would be able to adapt to space operations. If time allowed, he naturally hoped to go to the United States as soon as possible. That way, he would have plenty of time to get used to it. Chi-Yu believed that as long as he was around, there wouldn't be a conflict between the Church and the Dark Parliament. After all, they weren't fools. In the face of a similar crisis, it was always better to fight the enemy first. At this thought, the radiance in Chi-Yu's eyes became brighter. He lifted his head and looked at the boundless sky with confidence. No matter what, with so many powerful beings and tens of thousands of nuclear bombs as a guarantee, wouldn't they be able to destroy the asteroid? "Master, what exactly are you worried about?" When Chi-Yu arrived in London, the sky had already turned dark. He recalled Klinsmann's warm reception when he first came here, and he couldn't help but feel sad. No matter how bad Klinsmann was, he definitely had true feelings for Christie. With his identity as a Dark One, he actually used his life to exchange for Christie's. Such an action was enough to earn Rhodes' respect. Just like in Berlin, Chi released his aura. Of course, this time, he didn't need to wait anymore. After all, the Dracula Castle couldn't be compared to the Dark Parliament. Here, there was no threat to Chi-Yu's presence at all. Shortly after, Chi-Yu arrived at the Dracula Castle. Just as Lung-Er had said, the Dracula Castle had disappeared. Now that the Dracula Castle had disappeared, the powerful domain was reactivated with a large number of dark liches pouring energy into it. Looking at the empty space, Chi-Yu couldn't help but smile bitterly. It was also the Dracula Castle, but he didn't know how many bloodlines of the Dracula family were left. Just as he was about to think of a way to enter the invisibility domain of Dracula Castle, Chi-Yu suddenly sensed the presence of many vampires. He subconsciously retracted his own presence. He wasn't in a hurry and quietly observed. He saw, from the Dracula Castle, a faint blood-red light rose, and more than 30 vampires cut through the night sky. Leading the way was Christie, whom Chi-Yu was looking for. Christie had changed a lot, and Chi-Yu could clearly feel it from her cold eyes. Her dark purple hair was draped over her back. It spread its huge wings and flew at the front of the group. The vampires behind her were all survivors of the Dracula family. Judging from their auras, the strength of these vampires seemed to have increased to a certain extent. It was nighttime, so what was she bringing them to? With some curiosity in his heart, Chi-Yu activated Kieran's stealth and flew behind them. The flying speed of the vampires was not slow. This was already the outskirts of London, but they were flying further away. After flying for about half an hour, Christie came to an abrupt stop, and so did the many vampires of the Dracula family behind her. The remaining Duke vampire flew to Christie's side and asked respectfully, "Your Majesty Empress Christie, I'm afraid that you're still alive. Is there a problem?" Christie said coldly, "When we meet them later, none of you are to get involved without my order. I want to show them what a truly powerful vampire is. The noble vampire doesn't need helpers." The Grand Duke vampire's eyes revealed a trace of joy, but on the surface he said, "But, Your Majesty, won't it be too dangerous for you?" Christie looked at him coldly and said, "Do as I say. Otherwise, I don't mind transferring your blood power to another person." The dignified Grand Duke vampire trembled slightly after hearing Christie's words. He hurriedly responded respectfully and returned to his original camp. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. Chi-Yu, who was watching from a distance, couldn't help but sigh. "Su-Ching, oh Su-Ching, you've really changed. Although you were stubborn in the past, how did you become like this?" It was just like how the death of Wen-Ting and the others stimulated him. Klinsmann's death also greatly stimulated Su-Ching. Before she came back, she once told herself that from now on, there would be no more Su-Ching in this world. There would only be Vampire Empress Christie. "Christie, will Klinsmann really be happy with you doing this in the underworld?" Before Chi-Yu could think further, Christie had already led the vampires of the Dracula family to fly in the same direction as before. At this moment, Chi-Yu suddenly had a bad feeling. Even he didn't know where this feeling came from. But at this moment, a milky white radiance descended from the sky without any warning. The faint radiance flickered, and a tyrannical milky white radiance appeared in midair. Christie didn't even have the chance to dodge. Along with a mournful scream, she was enveloped by the milky white radiance. The so-called experts of the Dracula family reacted quickly. Of course, none of them went to save Christie. Instead, they scattered as fast as they could, as though they were afraid of being contaminated by the milky white radiance. Christie screamed painfully in the milky white radiance. Chi was also startled by this scene. He didn't hesitate at all and immediately rushed to rescue Christie. At this moment, a layer of purplish-golden radiance ignited on Christie's body. Her beautiful face revealed a trace of malevolence amidst the pain. A tyrannical purplish-golden radiance soared into the sky. Two blood-red radiances pierced through the air. In the blink of an eye, they pierced into the deepest part of the milky white radiance. A clear shattering sound entered Chi-Yu's ears. The milky white radiance disappeared abruptly, and the two blood-red radiances returned to Christie's hands. It was the Vampire Empress, the divine blood puppet that she obtained from the Dracula castle. Christie panted heavily. There were still some parts of her body that were burning in the milky white flames. Although the purplish-golden energy devoured the flames quickly, Chi clearly sensed that Christie's energy undulations were much weaker than before. Ambush. A sudden ambush. Chi was clear about the attribute of the milky white radiance. That's right, it was the holy light of the Holy Church. Besides, the degree of condensation seemed to be even stronger than that of a cardinal. Could it be that Pope Marty is here? Impossible. Marty was busy with the upcoming space mission. Even if he wanted to attack Christie, he definitely wouldn't choose this moment. He was clear about his relationship with Christie. However, the holy light clearly belonged to the Holy Church. Who exactly would ambush Christie? While Chi was pondering, a large amount of evil aura surged from all directions. Large amounts of evil aura surged over from all directions. The appearance of the pair of wings made Chi suddenly understand. So, it wasn't the Holy Church that wanted Christie dead. Instead, it was a vampire like her. There were a lot of vampires. Compared to the dozens of vampires that Christie had, there were no less than 1,000 vampires flying over. Moreover, there were dozens of Grand Duke vampires flying at the front. Such a powerful force was definitely not something that Christie's Dracula family could compare to. Looking at this scene, Chi couldn't help but sigh for Klinsmann. The once powerful Dracula family was the overlord of the entire vampire world. But now, his younger sister, Christie, had to lead dozens of her remaining clansmen to face thousands of vampires from other families. However, he was also secretly glad that he had come at the right time. Otherwise, he would have let down Klinsmann's trust in him. As the surrounding vampires swarmed over, the dozens of Dracula family vampires that tried to escape were forced back. Their eyes were filled with panic as they surrounded Christie. Christie stared coldly at the vampires who were forcing their way forward. The glint in her eyes became even colder. His breathing gradually calmed down, and the purplish-golden light around him retracted. The thousands of vampires surrounded them in a circle with a diameter of 100 meters. No longer pressing forward, the evil energy of the vampires permeated the air, forming an isolated domain in the silent night sky. Although it was not a real domain, but in front of so many vampires, it was almost impossible to escape. Perhaps Christie was the only one who could break through the encirclement. Despicable. I didn't expect you to use the holy light of the Holy Church just to deal with me. You're all traitors to the vampire race. A lazy and very elegant voice sounded. Miss Christie, it's your turn. Why did he say that? As pure-blooded heirs of the blood race, we just don't want to see a huge conflict between the blood race because of you. The blood race has been united for so many years. Back then, it was under His Highness Klinsman's leadership that we were able to develop to this extent. I think His Highness Klinsman also doesn't wish to see this happen. Christie's gaze became focused, and she looked in a direction. Cloth, come out. I know you're there. The vampires split apart, and a handsome young man in a blood-red cloak flew out from the crack. His short blonde hair was neatly combed on top of his head. He looked at Christie with an evil glint in his eyes. In terms of dressing, he was actually 80% similar to Klinsman. Seeing him, Christie couldn't help but recall the past. The coldness in her beautiful eyes disappeared a little, and she even became a little absent-minded. Beautiful Miss Christie, hello. Cloth gave Christie a gentleman's salute. Christie came back to her senses, and the glint in her eyes became incomparably cold. How dare you imitate my brother's attire? Cloth, you should know what the consequences are for blaspheming my brother's existence. Cloth pretended to be a little surprised. Really? But Miss Christie, don't you understand the situation in front of you? No matter what, you're still His Highness Klinsman's sister. I don't think you're stupid, right? Christie glanced at the surrounding vampires and said coldly, Cloth, do you think that numbers can determine the difference in strength? Don't forget, I'm the first queen in the history of the blood race. Don't tell me you dare to disobey my orders. Hearing her words, the faces of the surrounding vampires couldn't help but change, but they quickly returned to normal. Cloth smiled and said, Miss Christie, first of all, I have to admit that you're powerful. However, I can't recognize your identity as the Blood Emperor. First of all, your bloodline isn't pure. You're not the true heir of the Dracula family, but only an Easterner. As a noble blood race, there are very few people who follow the rules. Even if there are, they're just servants. We definitely can't accept the rule of an Easterner. This is something that all the major families have come to a consensus on. Fortunately, I've finally succeeded His Highness Klinsman and become the new generation's prince of the blood race. The position of the blood race's leader should belong to me. As for you, you're an Easterner. Even if you've obtained His Highness Klinsman's primordial blood, you can't be a pure blood race. So, you have to hand over your power today. If you're willing to take the initiative, when I become more powerful, I can consider letting you become my concubine. This should be the best ending, and it can also be considered as me answering to His Highness Klinsman. What do you think? Christie's breathing became obviously unstable, and her eyes flickered with purple light. However, she didn't make a move. This was a very wise choice. Although she had dispelled the holy light just now, it still caused her quite a bit of damage. She needed time now, more time to absorb enough energy from this dark night. She smiled, a trace of disdain and sarcasm appearing on her pretty face. Cloth, do you really think that you can destroy me here today? Cloth was taken aback. Why? Could it be that Miss Christie is still hallucinating? Christie shook her head. No, it's not a hallucination. I just want to tell you that perhaps my people can't leave today, but it doesn't mean that I can't leave either. Let's all surrender. I think that in front of so many families, you, Cloth, won't be able to kill the enemies who surrender. What's more, the rest of my clansmen are at least earls. For the major families, it's a good supplement. Hearing Christie's words, Chiyu almost exclaimed in admiration. Good idea, really good idea. Christie, you've grown up. In the face of such a crisis, she was still able to make such a wise choice. It was obviously the most correct decision. Although there were many enemies in front of them, These vampires were obviously from all vampire families. Let's not talk about whether they were a monolithic block or not. Just the lack of unity could cause a lot of problems. This vampire prince named Cloth was apparently elected not too long ago, and it was impossible for him to make all the vampire families submit to him. After all, the Dracula family was the purest family in the history of vampires. No matter how evil these vampires were, they couldn't possibly destroy the Dracula family completely. After all, they had to preserve the bloodline of their ancestor, Cain. Moreover, whichever family that obtained a pure-blooded member of the Dracula family could rightfully call themselves the pure-blooded vampire. Facing such temptation, at least the lives of the dozens of Christie's people wouldn't be in danger. As for Christie, even though she was severely injured, the difference in strength between the Blood Emperor and Blood Prince wasn't just a little. It was easier said than done to make her stay when she was injured. Not to mention these vampires. Even the chairman of the Dark Faction wouldn't have the confidence to make her stay. When Christie returned, she would make a rallying cry. As long as she possessed absolute strength, there was no need to fear that she couldn't revive the Dracula family. Before Cloth reacted, Christie's people raised their arms and flew toward the vampire families. These old men were at least 600 or 700 years old. Whatever Chi you could think of, they could naturally think of as well. Not only did he surrender, but they all surrendered to different places. According to his previous knowledge, they surrendered to different families, and they all chose some big families among the vampires. Cloth's expression gradually changed. It was apparent that he didn't expect Christie to make such a decision. In a short period of time, even though he understood Christie's intentions, he couldn't do anything about it. Among the people who surrendered, a portion of them had joined his family, and he couldn't bear to part with them. After all, it took time for a vampire to evolve. A vampire Grand Duke would have a lifespan of at least 1,500 years. How could he be willing to give up such an opportunity to strengthen himself? But he also knew that leaving the vampires of the Dracula family behind was equivalent to giving the Dracula family a chance to turn the tables. The elegance on his face gradually turned serious. Cloth's eyes had turned blood red. 2 long fangs protruded from his lips. For the sake of today's battle, he didn't hesitate to pay a huge price to borrow a powerful artifact from the Holy Church that was second only to a legendary artifact. However, that artifact was also destroyed by the blood god puppet. He didn't know how he was going to explain this to the Holy Church. If he couldn't make Christie stay today, then he would really go for wool and come home shorn. Christie gazed at Cloth, and the disdain in her eyes became more obvious. With just you, she lifted her right hand, and the blood god puppet flickered in a demonic radiance. The purplish-golden radiance emanated from her skin, and the incomparably terrifying pressure instantly changed Cloth's expression. Of course, he also knew that Christie had become the true Blood Emperor. However, to him, this was too good an opportunity. If he didn't take advantage of the Dracula family's strength being destroyed by the Holy Church, perhaps the vampires would become the Dracula family's subordinates in the future. It was also because of this opportunity that he was supported by many vampire families to go against Christie. The true strength of the Blood Emperor made him apprehensive. Nothing was more important than his life. On the surface, he couldn't tell the extent of Christie's injuries. He couldn't help but hesitate. Miss Christie, as long as you're willing to surrender and agree to disband the Dracula family, I can even consider not allowing you to contribute your strength. You only need to be under our surveillance and swear a blood oath to serve our family. If that's the case, I can let you become our family supreme elder. What do you think? Seeing the sinister look in Cloth's eyes, Christie said indifferently, "What? You can't threaten me, so you're trying to entice me? Cloth, do you think I can agree?" Cloth took a deep breath and said, "Then you're forcing us to take action? Your Highness Klinsman, it's not that I don't care about your feelings, but it's because your sister is too overbearing. Miss Christie, everyone here today is an elite chosen by the major families. At the very least, they're all barons of the vampire race. Although I may not be your match, I think as long as I can hold you back, the final outcome will not change. I'll give you one last chance. Give your mother's head A deep voice suddenly sounded beside Christie. Clough only felt a surge of energy that was even more terrifying than Christie's. He groaned, and under that enormous pressure, his body uncontrollably used teleportation and instantly left the center of the battlefield. Chi-Yu's figure gradually appeared beside Christie. His ice-cold eyes emitted the king's aura of the Zodiac King. Tyrannical energy waves were constantly released from his body as he swept his gaze across the vampires. Just you guys and you want to hurt Christie? As long as I'm here, not to mention 1,000 vampires, it's impossible even if all the vampires are here. Christie was dumbfounded as she sensed Chi-Yu's aura. She didn't expect that this man would actually appear by her side during her most difficult time. Just when she was being pressured by Clough, she thought that it would be great if he could come to her side. However, it was too late to seek help. The distance from the east to the west was so far, so how could they arrive in a short period of time? She could only blame herself for not planning properly. However, just as she was about to break through the encirclement, he suddenly appeared. That masculine face and tall, imposing figure appeared by her side. At this moment, the last trace of worry in her heart vanished with Chi-Yu's arrival. With such a man by her side, what else was there to worry about? What else was there to worry about? Although Chi-Yu was only one person, the sense of security that he gave her couldn't be replaced even by an army. Chi-Yu used his left hand to wrap around Christie's slender and shockingly explosive waist. A gentle energy of the source of nature flowed into her body. The holy light of the Holy Church was undoubtedly a destructive energy to vampires. Even the strongest vampire like Christie couldn't avoid it. However, to the energy of the source of nature, the remnant holy light was nothing more than nourishment. In the blink of an eye, Chi-Yu had completely dissolved the holy light in her body. At the same time, the warm energy had begun to heal her internal injuries. Christie felt the warmth of Chi-Yu's embrace. She didn't know if it was due to the energy of the source of nature, but she suddenly felt rather tired. She wanted to fall into a deep sleep in this man's embrace. If this could go on forever, she hoped that she wouldn't wake up. "Christie, how dare you collude with outsiders to meddle in our affairs? Aren't you afraid that His Highness Prince Klinsman will die a restless death?" Clough shouted furiously. Chi-Yu snorted in disdain. "If there's anyone who can make Big Brother Klinsman die a restless death, it's only you. All the Dracula family members here can testify that I've always been the closest companion of the Dracula family. Before Big Brother Klinsman passed away, he personally asked me to take care of Christie. Her business is my business. Compared to me, it seems that the power of the Holy Church that you borrowed is the real enemy of the vampire race. Take the words of the Yanhuang Republic. This is like saying that only the officials can set fires, but the people can't light lamps. Come on, let me see what kind of blow the thousands of vampire race can bring me." As soon as Chi-Yu's voice fell, the dejected Dracula family members returned to Christie's side at the fastest speed. They looked at Chi-Yu respectfully and saluted him. The vampire Grand Duke said loudly, "That's right. Mr. Chi-Yu will always be the best friend of the Dracula family. I can prove that he has long recognized His Highness Prince Klinsman as his elder brother. He's also the closest friend of His Highness Christie." Closest friend. Chi-Yu looked at this bootlicker helplessly, but at this time, he couldn't refute anything. He's really quick to change the rudder. However, it was no wonder that the remaining higher-ups of the Dracula family had such a big reaction. How deep was the impression that Chi-Yu left on them? He defeated 4 red-cloaked archbishops by himself. What kind of power was that? One had to know that if the 4 red-cloaked archbishops were here, perhaps most of the vampire race would choose to escape immediately. Recalling the scene where Chi-Yu used countless sword shadows at the end and destroyed the angels summoned by the 4 red-cloaked archbishops before they could even use their sacrifice skill, the Dracula family members still had a lingering fear in their hearts. With such a powerful being here and the only vampire queen of their race, what else did they have to be afraid of? Under the nourishment of Chi-Yu's source of nature, Christie's injured body quickly recovered. Nothing else could do, but with the assistance of the 8 cloud water, thundercloud force, and the source of nature, The healing effect was so strong that it was probably unparalleled in the world. Christie's eyes flickered coldly. She looked at Cloth and said coldly, "Now, I'll give you one last chance. Surrender and admit my position in the Dracula family. Or die." After all, Cloth was a vampire with a lifespan of 2,000 years. In such a tense situation, he definitely couldn't back down. Otherwise, his position in the vampire race would definitely plummet in the future. Even his position as a vampire prince couldn't avoid this situation. The blood-red wings on his back spread wide, and he roared, "Everyone, follow me." Thousands of vampires rushed over at the same time. All kinds of dark energy skills were condensed in the air. The pressure generated by thousands of vampires was still very huge. Even Shiyu felt that it was a little difficult to bear. Of course, this was only the pressure and not the power. Christie was about to rush out and attack, but she felt that Chiyu's hand on her waist was very tight. He didn't have the slightest intention of letting go. "You were injured just now. Let me do it." Chiyu smiled gently at Christie. Christie hesitated for a moment and said, "But this is my race's matter." Chiyu said, "Don't forget, you're the first blood queen in the history of vampires. Are you afraid that no one will obey you in the future? I promised Brother Klinsman that I would take good care of you. As for this, I will definitely do it." The two of them talked and didn't put the vampires in their eyes at all. Chiyu lifted his head and looked at Cloth, who was at the front. "How long do you think you can last under my hands?" As he said that, he raised his right hand. A golden light flashed, and the Xianyuan sword appeared. The moment the sharp energy appeared in Chiyu's hand, a huge crack appeared in the enormous pressure of thousands of vampires. Feeling the aura of the sword, the vampires who were advancing stopped in their tracks. That wasn't holy energy, but it was even more holy. In the next moment, Chiyu let these vampires know what true strength was. The golden light on the Xianyuan sword shone brightly. Under the full power of Chiyu's own energy, a 30-meter-long sword ray appeared out of thin air. The huge sword ray was more than 5 meters wide and 30 meters long. In Chiyu's hands, it was even more terrifying than the Grim Reaper's scythe. Suddenly feeling that Chiyu's aura was locked on him, Cloth didn't hesitate and immediately teleported to hide among his people. No matter how important his face was, it wasn't as important as his life. Chapter 277. When the Xianyuan sword was drawn, the weather changed. The entire dark night suddenly lit up, becoming even brighter than the day. Chiyu continued to float beside Christie and did not leave for even a moment. However, the Xianyuan divine sword in his hand had already abruptly shot forward with a huge golden light. Teleportation? When Klinsman used teleportation in front of Chiyu for the first time, it did give him a lot of trouble. However, things change with time. The current Chiyu was no longer the Chiyu of the past. He had powerful mental strength and powerful energy of the source of nature. Although he couldn't stop Klinsman from using teleportation, as long as the opponent's strength wasn't close to his, he could easily use these two abilities to grasp the opponent's landing point. The golden light was like a rainbow, piercing through the entire area. A huge gap appeared in the encirclement. A cloud of blood mist appeared along with the golden light, covering at least a dozen square meters. It wasn't a human's blood mist. As the golden light flashed, the thunderous Xianyuan sword took the lives of at least 30 vampires. The sharp tip of the sword stopped in front of Cloth's chest. A corpse? You want a corpse in front of the Xianyuan sword? Do you think you're Athena or the Pope? Cloth died without a complete corpse. He turned into a rain of blood. Dozens of high-level vampires were buried with him. One sword, it was just a simple sword. He just raised his hand and made a piercing gesture. Almost all the vampires thought that if it wasn't a piercing gesture, but a sweeping gesture, then what would the outcome be? Some of the vampires at the edge of the golden light actually peed their pants. Rejoice. Rejoice that their companions who were just beside them turned into blood mist in the next moment. That golden light flashed past them. That incomparably sharp, awe-inspiring righteousness made them tremble. Everyone looked at Chiyu in a different light. Chiyu said faintly, "You have to remember one thing. She's not only Klinsman's sister, but she's also my sister. The younger sister was plotted against, so the older brother naturally had to stand up for her. Remember my name? I am Chiyu. Even with the Pope in front of me, he didn't dare to be presumptuous. To tell you the truth, I just came from the Dark Council. Even that old Dark Lord has to behave himself in front of me, not to mention you vampires. Who said Christian wasn't a real, pure-blood vampire? Wasn't it possible for a pure-blooded vampire to become an unprecedented blood emperor? Let me be frank with you. Christie inherited Dracula's primordial blood, not Klinsmann's. I believe that one of you should be able to verify the purity of the bloodline. You can try it now. However, let me say this first. If my sister's blood is not Dracula's, I will not say a word. Take her and leave immediately, never to interfere with your Dracula family's matters. On the other hand, if she is a pure-blood Dracula, then such a powerful blood emperor will be your only master in the future. If anyone wants to resist, ask yourself if you can withstand my little sister's blood race's only divine artifact, the blood god puppet. Of course, there's also the sword in my hand, the strongest attack weapon from the East, Xianyuan sword. It's synonymous with the righteousness of the world. Chiyu, you idiot, what nonsense are you spouting? I am the sword of benevolence, what righteousness of the world? Really? Xianyuan complained in Chiyu's heart. Chiyu said snappily, Brother Xianyuan, when I killed people just now, you seemed very excited. From start to finish, I didn't notice that you were benevolent at all. I'm already giving you face by not saying that you are the sword of death. You? All right, so be it, boundless righteousness. But shouldn't you get rid of these guys in front of you? These evil auras are my favorite things to destroy. Chiyu thought in his heart. You really are the sword of death. Get rid of them all? If you get rid of my sister, won't you become a commander without an army? While Chiyu and Xianyuan were conversing, the surrounding vampires were all stunned. For a moment, no one knew how to deal with the situation in front of them. These vampires were really unwilling to submit to an Eastern woman. But, let alone Christie, this Eastern man who suddenly appeared was so powerful that they couldn't even think of resisting him. What should they do now? They couldn't help but ask each other the same question. The answer was soon revealed. Some of the vampires didn't move, while a small portion of them instantly scattered and ran in different directions. Want to leave? Chiyu laughed and said to Xianyuan through his mind, Big brother, go and subdue those evil spirits. Without Chiyu's control, the Xianyuan sword floated out. With a faint flicker of light, it instantly reached the outermost area. Wherever the golden light passed, the vampires did not even have the slightest ability to resist. The moment they came into contact with the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, they immediately turned into dust like the vampires before them. However, this time, the Xianyuan sword didn't annihilate all the vampires who escaped. It wasn't because it wasn't powerful enough or couldn't take care of them, but because someone stole its business. As soon as the Xianyuan sword floated out, the Yin spirit's voice sounded in Chiyu's mind. Me too. After 3 simple words, without waiting for Chiyu's consent, the 5 elements divine dragons had already surged out of the Kongtong seal. Those were 5 30-meter-long dragons. Although they were made of energy, they looked spectacular in the pitch-black night. Against super powerhouses like the Bull Demon King or Yamu, the 5 elements divine dragons could only be used to delay them. However, against the vampires, they could show off their prowess. Putting aside the fact that most of the vampires in front of them didn't have a cultivation level of more than 2,000 years, even a 10,000-year-old beast wouldn't be able to fight against the 5 elements divine dragons. Although the Xianyuan sword was fast, it was only a sword after all. It definitely couldn't use its ultimate move to destroy the vampires. The 5 elements divine dragons flew in 5 different directions. When the Xianyuan sword destroyed a quarter of the vampires who escaped, the rest were taken care of by the 5 elements divine dragons. Trembling. Every vampire who was still alive or dead was trembling. Not only were their bodies trembling, but their hearts were also trembling. What kind of power was that? The Grand Dukes of the vampires had the same thought at the same time. 5 giant dragons and that divine artifact longsword. The mysterious power from the east was so irresistible. They no longer had the slightest intention to resist. There was only fear in her eyes as she looked at Qiyu. The Xianyuan sword and the 5 elements divine dragons returned to Qiyu's body. Qiyu forcefully sealed his connection with Xuanyuan's soul and the Yin's spirit with his mental strength, because the 2 old friends were quarreling over the unequal distribution of the loot. He faced the vampires lazily and said, "All right, who else wants to escape now? Those who escape in the face of battle don't deserve to be part of the Blood Clan. The Blood Clan is a noble race, not only in appearance, but also in character. Don't you think so?" An old Grand Duke of the Vampires was pushed forward, but he didn't dare to approach. He just looked at Qiyu from afar and said, "All right, we agree with your suggestion just now, as long as Miss Christie really has the blood of the Dracula family. We are willing to worship her as our clan leader." Qiyu made an inviting gesture. "Bring it on." What happened next was simple. The old Duke approached Qiyu and Christie carefully. He peeked at the Xianyuan sword in Qiyu's hand and took a drop of blood sample from Christie's finger. It was simple. He didn't need any equipment at all. When he sensed the energy waves and the incomparably familiar aura from the drop of purplish-red blood, the old Duke was completely shocked. He was even more shocked than when he saw the 5 elements divine dragons and the Xianyuan sword. "How is it?" Qiyu asked with a smile. The old Duke muttered to himself, "No, that's impossible. How can it be? How can it be?" The Grand Duke vampires tensed up and cursed inwardly. "You old fella, even if you don't have the blood of the Dracula family, can't you say that she is? That Eastern man is so terrifying. If you don't say it, won't he destroy all of us here? Even if most of the vampires he killed were only Baron vampires. But he had also killed a vampire prince. That kind of strength is enough to destroy all of us. Rather than dying, we might as well acknowledge Christie as our master. At least we can live on. Why does the purity of the bloodline matter now?" As the Grand Duke vampires cursed the old Duke for not understanding the situation, the old Duke's words left them dumbfounded. "This is the first time I've seen such a pure bloodline of the Dracula family. This is actually similar to the bloodline of Cain's ancestors within 3 generations. What a comfortable feeling. This was definitely not wrong. This is the purest bloodline of the Dracula family. This old slave of the Charles family, Lipton Charles, will follow my master forever and serve Her Majesty Christie as our clan leader for all eternity. If I betray you, I will die from the bloodline virus." Vampires' power came from their blood. They swore with their blood as their final oath. Most of the vampires thought that the old Duke was putting on a show. But even if it was a show, it had to be done. These dark creatures had always worshipped power. Now that the other party was so powerful, how could they not yield? One by one, they kowtowed in midair and repeated the same oath. Blood oaths couldn't be broken easily. The current Christie was even more powerful than Klinsman. She was definitely the true clan leader of the vampires. From now on, with the restrictions of the blood oath, none of the vampires present could disobey her orders. Now that there was nothing for Qiyu to do, he was happy to be at ease. He let go of Christie's hand and floated quietly at the side. Christie displayed the demeanor of an empress and said in a deep voice, "All Grand Duke vampires of the major families, come forward." Under her command, the Grand Duke vampires came before her one after another. Christie looked at them and said calmly, "My Dracula family has suffered a great loss after the battle with the Holy Church. I think everyone knows this. At the same time, you should also know that although our clan leader can become one of the 13 members of the Dark Parliament, we have never been the true core of the Dark Parliament. Why is that? Isn't it because our vampires aren't powerful enough? If not, why would the Holy Church dare to invade our territory? In this world where the strong preys on the weak, there is nothing you can do without powerful strength. You can only be a subsidiary of the Dark Parliament. Is it because our vampires can't become truly powerful? The answer is no. I used to think that the vampires could never be compared to the Dark Parliament. But after I became the Blood Empress, I realized that I was wrong. Our vampires also have the possibility to become powerful. At least I have the confidence to go against the chairman of the Dark Parliament. However, the overall strength of our vampires is far from enough. In terms of numbers, we are no less than the Dark Warriors and Dark Liches. Why are we not powerful enough? There is only one answer, and that is because we are not united enough. This time, the Dracula family suffered a great loss. Since all of you have sworn to serve me as your clan leader, I will work hard for the entire vampires. In order to improve the strength of the Blood Clan, I've decided to let all of you join the Dracula family and become a part of the Dracula family. Each family that you belong to will also become a vassal of the Dracula family. From now on, my orders will be the only orders for the entire Blood Clan. Your Majesty, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate. None of the previous clan leaders have done this. What you're doing is equivalent to burying the history of our clans. Christie stared coldly at the Grand Duke vampires and said, "History isn't burying it. If any of you become powerful in the future, you can also become my clan leader. I didn't say that the other families will disappear. They will only become the vampires of our Dracula family. All of you know that the Dracula family is the purest vampires. This is also the main reason why I can become the Blood Empress." Although the other dukes didn't speak, it was apparent from their disapproving gazes that none of them would support her. Christie gazed coldly at the powerful vampires and said calmly, "Perhaps you think that this will restrict your family's freedom, but you have to think about how powerful the United Vampires are. Of course, I won't let you pay this price for nothing. If you are willing to become members of the Dracula family, I will bestow upon you the Dracula family's bloodline. I will let you become true, pure-blooded vampires." This time, their reactions were completely different. Who didn't want to become a pure-blooded vampires? The vampires who valued bloodlines the most valued this point. Before the others spoke, the Grand Duke who tested Christie's blood said eagerly, "Your Majesty, I am willing. I am willing to lead my entire family to become the Dracula family's vampires. Please bestow upon me the Dracula family's bloodline. I will always be your most loyal servant." The old duke's reaction suddenly shocked the other Grand Dukes because they all knew very well that the old patriarch of the Charles family had always attached the most importance to the honor of the family. He suddenly made such a decision. Was he afraid of Her Majesty Empress in front of him, or was he not putting on a show when he tested the blood just now? Before the Grand Dukes could think further, Christie nodded and said, "All right, I will bestow upon you the Dracula family's bloodline." As she spoke, her body flashed and appeared beside the Grand Duke in the blink of an eye. Her movements were even faster than lightning. The Grand Duke let out a groan as the blood god puppet pierced into the main artery on his neck. All the Grand Dukes were shocked, but with Chiyu glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey, who would dare to move? A purplish-gold radiance shone from Christie's body. A drop of purplish-gold blood flowed from her finger into the blood god puppet and into the Grand Duke's main artery. His pained expression gradually disappeared and was replaced by incomparable excitement. With the blood god puppet gone, the wound closed naturally. The old Duke threw his head back and roared, evil energy surging out of his body and enveloping him. A layer of blood-red mist rose, and as his roar grew louder and louder, the evil energy grew stronger and stronger. Such a situation, the Grand Dukes couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Of course, they knew what was going on. This would only happen when a vampire advanced in rank. The original energy had evolved into a blood-red color. This proved that the Grand Duke had advanced to the rank of a prince. Just a drop of blood had such a huge effect. Could it be? Could it be the Empress' primordial blood? Christie didn't expect the Grand Duke's reaction. Of course, she wouldn't bestow the precious primordial blood. What she forced out was only a drop of her essence blood. Actually, although her blood contained a large amount of energy, a drop of essence blood had a limit. The old Duke's reaction was due to the fact that he had a limited amount of energy. The main reason why the Grand Duke had such a reaction was mainly due to his years of cultivation. With this drop of blood essence, he broke through the bottleneck and advanced. Who didn't want to become stronger? Who didn't want to have a pure bloodline? At this moment, no one hesitated in the face of Chiyu and Christie's strength and the blood oath they had just sworn. Almost at the same time, the rest of the Grand Dukes bowed to Christie respectfully and asked her to bestow the Dracula family's bloodline. Chi watched from the side. He couldn't help but praise inwardly. After the battle with the Holy Church, the Dracula family's losses were too great. It was impossible to recover without 1,000 years. On the other hand, Christie took a different path and used this special method to restore the strength of the Dracula family. Not only that, but they were also much stronger than before. Moreover, with the Dracula family's patriarchs joining them, it could be said that they had indirectly controlled the entire vampire race. It seemed like Christie really had the potential to be a ruler. When Christie returned to the Dracula castle with Chi-Yu, she was already exhausted. Although her injuries were healed by Chi-Yu, her energy was greatly depleted by the holy power. She also forced out a lot of essence blood for the Grand Dukes. What she needed most now was rest. Chi-Yu, thank you so much for today. If it weren't for you, I think the best outcome for me would be to escape. Chi-Yu shook his head. Don't say that. Brother Klinsmann asked me to take care of you. This is what I should do. To be honest, I've let you and Brother Klinsmann down for what happened last time. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have been attacked by the Holy Church. Christie's expression changed. She sighed. Don't say any more. The past is the past. I think Big Brother doesn't really blame you. Everything is destined by the heavens. Is there anything you need from me this time? Chi-Yu shook his head. No, I just happened to pass by London and came to see you. He had already decided not to let Christie participate in this mission, not to mention the fact that her strength alone couldn't make a decisive difference. Judging from her current situation, it wasn't suitable for her to participate in the mission with him. She still had a lot of things to do after finally settling the internal affairs of the vampire race. Taking advantage of the fact that the Dark Parliament was concentrating their strength to follow her to participate in this mission, it was also a good opportunity for her to completely unite the vampires. Although the vampires belonged to the Dark Parliament, he could rest assured with Christie as the commander. Perhaps this force could be of great help to him in the future. A faint light flickered. Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a trace of gentleness. Christie, rest well. I'm leaving. Christie was taken aback. You just arrived. Why are you leaving already? Chi-Yu said, I still have a lot of things to do in the West this time, so I can't waste too much time. I must hurry off and attend to my affairs. You have to take care of yourself from now on, not only for yourself, but also for Klinsmann. I think if he could see the scene today, I'll be proud of you. Christie's eyes reddened. At this moment, the domineering aura of a vampire queen was nowhere to be found. She threw herself into Chi-Yu's arms and burst into tears. Hugging her delicate body, Chi-Yu did not know how to comfort her. When he first met her, she was only a student. In a span of 2 years, she had changed from a young girl who was less than 20 years old to the current vampire queen. So many things had happened during this period. Her experiences were not as simple as his. For a girl like her, living in such a complicated world of darkness was indeed difficult for her. Christie cried for a full hour. She was a Yin Huang, far away from her own country, living among a group of foreigners. The feeling of loneliness had long filled her heart with fatigue. If it weren't for Klinsmann, she would have left the vampire community a long time ago. She would have returned to her hometown. However, Klinsmann's death could be said to have brought her a huge responsibility. At that time, she could not help but do it. At this moment, thinking of the dead Klinsmann, thinking of her people far away in Yanhuang, she could not help but feel sad. For a moment, she was a little carried away by her crying. Chi did not disturb her because he knew. At this time, letting her express all her inner feelings would be of great benefit to her. He did not want Christie to become a cold-blooded queen in the future. Chi-Yu, I have no home anymore. I only have you as a friend. In the future, will you still come to see me? Christie looked at Chi-Yu pitifully and asked. Yes, definitely. Chi-Yu replied without hesitation. I will always be your friend. Becoming the leader of the Dracula family, the leader of the entire vampire race, does not mean that you cannot return home. After things here are settled, you can often return to Yanhuang to visit. You are Brother Klinsmann's sister, and at the same time, you are also your parents' daughter. You can tell them that you are studying here, but you cannot stay here for too long. Christy was a little confused. Then what should I do? You also saw that it was not easy for the vampire race to unite. If I go back to Yin Wang, who knows what will happen here again? I cannot watch my brother's foundation be destroyed in any way. Qiyu smiled and said, "Silly girl, why isn't your brain working well? Isn't this easy to solve? With your current position in the vampire family, isn't it easy to fabricate an identity as a student? When the time comes, when it is about time for you to graduate, just tell your parents that you found a job here. Or you might as well bring them over to live. Although London is not very suitable for living, it is still much better than your family being separated. When the time comes, you can buy them the best house and live with them in London. It is not far from here anyway, and you can come back often to visit. Won't this problem be solved?" Hearing Qiyu's words, Christy's tears turned into a smile. "That's right. I'm really confused. Why didn't I think of this solution? 2 years later, when the time for me to study abroad is almost up, the blood tribe should have improved under my management. When that time comes, there shouldn't be any problems if I secretly bring them over." "Qiyu, actually I am very worried now." Qiyu asked. "Worried? About what? Worried that the Vatican will attack you again?" "I don't think so." Christy shook her head and said, "No, I'm not worried about the Vatican. After the previous lesson, I will be extra careful in the future. Now that the Dracula family has become stronger, the Vatican will not take the risk to attack us unless there is an extremely important reason. I am worried about the Dark Parliament. In the past, the vampire families were independent and couldn't influence them much, nor could they become the core members of the Dark Council. However, it's different now. After I unite all the vampire families and form a powerful force, do you think the Dark Council will sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor and directly control the blood race?" Hearing Christy's words, Qiyu couldn't help but ponder. Indeed, nominally speaking, the vampire race was a member of the Dark Parliament. Once the vampire race became stronger, it would be coveted by the Dark Parliament. Moreover, hell might descend soon. By that time, even if Christy wasn't weak, she wouldn't be able to fight against hell and the Dark Parliament. He didn't want Christy to become his enemy in the future. Thinking until here, Qiyu said, "This situation might happen, but there are also many internal problems in the Dark Parliament. I can even tell you that the power of the Dark Parliament's chairman has been taken away. Right now, their main focus is on other matters. Generally speaking, they won't pose any threat to you. But if the Dark Parliament asks you to lead the vampire race to surrender or be used by them, you must not refuse. Otherwise, it will inevitably bring a devastating disaster to the vampire race. When that time comes, you can pretend to be a snake and find a way to contact me. Let me help you solve this problem." If it were someone else who said this, Christy would definitely not believe it. However, the powerful strength that Qiyu had displayed and the aura that made her feel at ease made her feel an indescribable trust in him. Nodding her head, she said, "Then I'll do as you say. Qiyu, thank you. You have helped me so much. But back then I once framed you. Do you still hate me?" Qiyu smiled and said, "I'm not such a petty person. What's in the past is in the past. What's there to hate? All right, I really have to leave this time. Take care of yourself. As I said, if you encounter any problems here, you must inform me immediately. No matter where I am on Earth, I will definitely rush over to help you within half a day." After saying this, Qiyu stood up and walked towards the direction of the window. "Wait, Qiyu," Christy called out to Qiyu. Qiyu turned around and asked doubtfully, "What's wrong? Is there anything else?" Christy lowered her head and gently fiddled with the corner of her clothes. She said in a very low voice, "Qiyu, have you always thought that I'm a lesbian?" Qiyu was taken aback. He really didn't know how to answer this question, but the past had already proven it. If it weren't for Shan Yunzu Yun, she wouldn't have framed him. Chapter 278. Qiyu is also considered a veteran in the field of love. After hearing Christy's explanation, he immediately understood and thought, it can't be. My luck with the ladies is too good. I just agreed to be with a man for a day. Could it be that even Christy, I understand. Christy, you're all grown up now. I think you will definitely find a good home in the future. At a time like this, in order to avoid any emotional entanglements, Qiyu could only muddle through and hope to deceive her. Christy raised her head abruptly. Her big eyes were already filled with tears. She said emotionally, "How can I still have a good home in my current state? Who would want to marry a vampire? Don't tell me that it's impossible for me to marry a vampire in the future. Although my body has become a vampire, but my heart is still human. Chiyu, seeing you again today, I could be honest with you. Actually, you're not my type. But now I have no other choice. Among humans, the only one who can accept my identity is you. I am a woman, and I also need a man's love. Are you willing to be with me?" Huh? She was so direct. Chiyu was stunned by Christy's question. Although he did not have a faction problem with Christy like he did with Ling'er, how could he answer at this moment? He had already decided not to add any more emotional ties. However, he didn't have the heart to reject her. In this aspect, Ling'er's judgment of him was very accurate. "Christian, calm down." In fact, Chiyu hesitated for a long time, but did not say anything. "Actually, what? Are you trying to tell me that there are other men who can accept a woman like me? I'm a vampire. Forbidden vampires. Chiyu, don't tell me you don't want me either. I'm not good enough for you." Christy became even more agitated. Chiyu looked at her with a bitter smile and thought to himself, "You said that I'm not your type at all, and that you only want to be with me because you have no other choice. Not to mention that I don't plan to have more women, even if I want to. You said so. How can I accept your feelings? Am I supposed to be with a woman who doesn't like me at all? Christian, calm down a bit. There is no possibility between us. As you know, I already had Ming Ming, Ruyue, and Wenting. My heart is already stained by them. I can't add anyone else to it." Christy slowly walked in front of Chiyu. Looking at his awkward expression, she couldn't help but giggle and say, "Humph." He found out the moment he tested it. "So you never liked me at all? Then why did you tease me back then in Qingbei University?" A woman's face changes faster than flipping a book. Chiyu was shocked by Christian's change. "You don't have to be embarrassed. I was just joking with you. Is it that rare? They all like you, but I don't. What's so good about you? You're not handsome at all. You're not the type I like at all. What I meant just now was to tell you. When I bring my parents over, can you pretend to be a married couple with me? I can't never get married. At least I have to explain to my parents." Chiyu was stunned for a moment and said, "You mean to say that you want to pretend to be a married couple with me and let me lie to your parents? But don't forget, a married couple has to have children." Christian said naturally, "Isn't that simple? Just give birth to one." "Yeah, easy. I can't cheat with my body." Chiyu looked at Christian and couldn't help but blush. Girls nowadays were actually so open, it seemed that they were even more hoodlum than him. Christian smiled and said, "Why? A former hoodlum also knows fear now. Didn't you say that beautiful sister could only obtain your body, but would never be able to obtain your pure soul? Now I'm just borrowing your body for a while. Don't tell me that I'm not a beautiful sister in your eyes. I'm just borrowing your seed. It's not like you need to give birth to it. That works?" Chiyu stared blankly at Christian. Borrowing his seed, only she could think of it. Christian said disapprovingly, "Why not? Although you're not good-looking, you still have some ability. Plus, with my excellent bloodline, you can definitely give birth to a little blood emperor. I don't need you to be responsible." It seems that it's still too early to talk about this now. Let's discuss this later." Chiyu walked towards the window in a somewhat awkward manner. He really didn't dare to stay any longer. Christian smiled and said, "Are you afraid? Look, it's already so late. Why don't you leave tomorrow morning? I want to try the feeling of borrowing your seed to plant. If by any chance, I'll tell my parents." "Hey, don't run." "Don't run? If I don't run, I'll be borrowing his seed now." Chiyu didn't think that his self-control was that strong, so he rushed out of the window and disappeared in the blink of an eye with a speed that surprised even himself. Looking at the direction in which Chiyu left, the smile on Christian's pretty face gradually disappeared, and a trace of sadness gradually emerged. She sighed softly and muttered to herself, "It seems that the estrangement from back then still exists. I'm afraid that between him and I, at most, is a relationship of borrowing his seed. Forget it. I'm already a vampire. Other than being a lover, what else can I do?" In America, V3 Secret Military Base. This base was the world's largest military base, and At the same time, it was also the most advanced military base. The entire base, within a radius of several hundred square kilometers, was completely a military control zone. There were only 7 days left before the asteroid hit Earth, and all the arrangements were in full swing. All the nuclear bombs in the possession of various countries had been sent to this military base. It could be said that if this military base were to explode now, the entire Earth might be blown into a huge hole. The incomparably powerful shock waves and radiation could completely destroy at least half of the world's creatures. It was precisely because the number of nuclear weapons stationed here was too terrifying that the two most well-equipped main armies of the United States were stationed at the periphery. All kinds of radar and satellite detection equipment could be said to have achieved seamless coverage of the entire base. Even if a mosquito flew into the base, news would immediately be sent to the main control room of the base. The soldiers were armed with live ammunition, and there was a person every 10 meters. The tight defensive measures were breathtaking. At the same time as the nuclear weapons of various countries, there were also representatives sent by various countries who were the powerhouses carrying out this mission. The arrival of the asteroid made the entire Earth nervous, and naturally, the most nervous was the United States. As the world's largest country, although they weren't the overlord, they definitely didn't want Earth to be destroyed. Therefore, in order to deal with the asteroid this time, the United States even leaked many military secrets to other countries. Thus, in order to deal with the asteroid this time, the United States had even leaked many military secrets to other countries. In the entire base, a total of 1,600 mechas were ready to go. In the entire base, a total of 1,600 mechas were ready to go. The powerhouses from various countries were also completely concentrated in this military base, and they had to conduct at least 2 mock exercises every day. Ryue and the others had just arrived at this military base yesterday morning. However, they received very bad news. In order to be able to intercept the asteroid as soon as possible, this mission was scheduled to start 5 days before the asteroid hit Earth. In other words, they had 2 more days. They were about to head into space. This news was, of course, nothing to Ryue and the Zodiac army. After all, they were already here. However, what worried them the most was that Qiyu did not know about this because he had left Yin Huang earlier. Qiyu's phone was not turned on at all, and they could not think of any way to inform him now. Although they were worried that Qiyu would not be able to arrive in time, Ryue and the others were also a little glad that this mission could be completed successfully without Qiyu's participation. It would also allow him to avoid danger. After thinking it through, everyone was no longer so worried. The powerhouses from the east were arranged to live on the east side of the base. In addition to cooperating with the powerhouses from the west and adapting to the single nuclear bomb equipment every day, they lived here. The facilities of this base were extremely advanced, but no one used all kinds of devices that were similar to entertainment. The entire base was shrouded in a depressing atmosphere. This time, the lineup of the Guardians of the East could be said to be very strong. The 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors led their 12 Zodiac squads, as well as Snow Girl, the Plant Soul, and Shang Bing. Originally, Ryue wanted Snow Girl and the other 2 to stay in the Dragon Field courtyard. However, the 3 women could not bear the loneliness and worry, so they finally followed them. When Ryue and the others first arrived at V3 base, they were very unpopular. Although the Yinhuang Republic had an excellent aviation unit with them, they had transported all the nuclear bombs that were prepared to participate in this mission. However, when the Zodiac Legion appeared in front of the American mecha soldiers, they were immediately ridiculed by the other party. It was no wonder that the American soldiers looked down on them. These mecha soldiers were the most elite troops selected from millions of U.S. soldiers. Every one of them had gone through countless trials of blood and fire to be selected as the #1 elite legion of the United States. Although there were only 1,600 of them in total, they had the ability to destroy a country. Every American mecha warrior was over 2 meters tall, and solid muscles filled every part of their bodies. Even if they weren't wearing their mechas, if they were to stand in a row, they would definitely be as solid as a steel fortress. Compared to them, the bodies of the Zodiac Legion soldiers looked much thinner. The Zodiac Legion soldiers naturally would not tolerate the ridicule of the American army. If they were underestimated by their future partners, then there would definitely be problems when they truly cooperated with each other. Therefore, in order to better cooperate with the American mecha soldiers, the Zodiac Legion soldiers gently competed with these mecha soldiers. Facts often proved everything. When Ming Ming lifted a 3-ton military vehicle with her slender body, these mecha soldiers immediately opened their mouths wide. Their jaws were so wide that 3 apples could fit into them. However, these American soldiers quickly found an excuse for themselves. If they did not have enough strength, they would not have come to participate in this mission. Strength alone was obviously far from enough for a true soldier. Therefore, a letter of challenge was issued, agreeing to have a friendly match on the second day after Ryue and the others arrived. Now, Ryue and the Zodiac Legion soldiers were already waiting for the American mecha soldiers in the training ground of the base. The American soldiers were very punctual. Although the competition this time was private, these soldiers had also received secret orders from the higher-ups. The higher-ups of the American military were still worried about these ordinary-looking guardians of the East. Hence, they were obviously very eager to see their soldiers test the strength of these Easterners. What made the Zodiac Legion soldiers not know whether to laugh or cry was that the American mecha soldiers were not the only ones who came. There were also some people they were very familiar with. They were Yamu, the successor of the Greek goddess Athena, and Cardinal Paul Gasol, a subordinate of the Pope. Paul Gasol had a sacred look from beginning to end, and no emotions could be seen in his calm eyes. Yamu, on the other hand, had a gentle smile on her pretty face, giving off a very harmonious feeling. Both of them were followed by 4 guards. Paul Gasol was followed by the experts of the Vatican, while Yamu was naturally followed by the 4 Zodiac Guardians. Mephistopheles looked at the tall American mecha soldiers around him, who seemed to have no brains. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. These American soldiers actually wanted to challenge the Zodiac Legion soldiers. Wasn't this the same as stepping on landmines and jumping thunder, courting death? Even if Chi Yu was not here, his companions were all abnormally strong. How could ordinary people defeat them? Even if these mecha soldiers have been trained for a long time, they might not be able to do it. However, since they were willing to give it a try, naturally no one would object. A total of 16 mecha soldiers had come. They seemed to be from the same squad, and all of them were wearing their own mechas. The mechas seemed to be about 4 meters tall, and their entire bodies were silvery white. The metal surface flickered with a faint light. They were very well made. From their observations over the past few days, the Zodiac Legion soldiers knew that the main weapon of these mecha soldiers was a heat ray gun and a laser knife. At the same time, some hidden parts of the mecha could also be equipped with small rockets or small homing bombs. The wide back of these mecha could be equipped with 4 nuclear bombs through the slots. They could be considered the most powerful individual combat weapon in the world right now. Even the Zodiac Legion soldiers had to admit that these mecha soldiers were well trained. They were all elites of the American army. Their uniform movements caused their respective mechas to produce almost the same clanging sound as they follow behind the Vatican and the Greek team to the training ground. To control these tall mechas, one must not only have very good control skills. At the same time, because these mechas could carry out certain flight missions in space, they could also carry out short-distance flights on Earth. This required the pilot's body to be very strong. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to withstand the pressure brought by the mechas during flight and combat. These mecha soldiers had to go through at least 5 years of training before they could really start carrying out missions. Previously, the number of mechas of the U.S. military was not very large. However, in order to deal with the possibility of war or special changes at any time, the U.S. military invested a lot of resources, manpower, and material resources in the training of mecha soldiers. This was why they were able to quickly produce mechas for this mission after the asteroid crisis. The Pope and Yamu led their respective subordinates and stopped in front of the Zodiac Legion soldiers. The Zodiac Legion soldiers did not have a good impression of either side. They all looked at them quietly with a straight face. Pope Marty took 2 steps forward. His expression was still as calm as ever. "Greetings, protectors of the East," Ryue said calmly. "I didn't expect that a small challenge would even alarm Your Highness the Pope," Marty said calmly. "In order to avoid any damage to both sides, we protectors of the East and West can also grow together through this exchange of pointers. In order for us guardians of the East and the West to grow together through sparring, Miss Raineye and I have specially come to be the witnesses and referees of this sparring match between your side and the American Mecha Warriors." The Greeks knew how strong the Zodiac Legion soldiers were. Of course, the Pope also knew how strong the Zodiac Legion soldiers were, especially the abnormally strong Chiyu. However, the relationship between the Vatican and the United States was also very ordinary. The Vatican's main forces were concentrated in Europe, and the United States, as the world's largest country, had always been the place where he wanted to spread his teachings. It was just that it was difficult for the American government to accept him. This time, since the American soldiers were going to fight against the Zodiac Legion soldiers, it was definitely not a bad thing for the Vatican. Whether it was to see the strength of the American mecha soldiers or the strength of the subordinates brought by the Zodiac Legion soldiers, it was definitely beneficial for the Vatican. This was why he came with Yuma this time. The American mecha soldiers could be said to be their super trump card. As long as they could enter this rank, they would at least have the rank of captain or above. The American mecha warriors could be said to be their super trump cards. Any soldier who could enter this rank would at least be a captain or above. The highest rank of a squad leader could even reach the rank of a colonel. The highest commander of all the mecha warriors was the President of the United States. There was no presidential warrant. No one had the right to command this army. It was also because of the importance of this mecha army in the world military that they were able to invite the Vatican and the Greek guardians to come and act as judges. It was quite normal. The mecha operators also had their own thoughts. Since they were going to compete, they wanted to fully display their strength in front of the various powers of the world. This would also prove that they, the mecha operators, were the true leaders of this mission, and not those so-called powerhouses. They had never thought that the power of human beings could compete with the powerful technology. The 16 mech warriors lined up neatly behind the Pope and the others. With the same sound, the thick titanium alloy chest plate on the chest of the mech swiftly opened up. One by one, burly soldiers wearing the special military uniform of Mecha Warrior walked out. In order to face the challenge against the Guardian of the East this time, the higher-ups of the United States had secretly given clear instructions that they could only win and not lose. Thus, the 16 Mecha Warriors who could appear here were all powerhouses of the Mecha Corps. They were also the first to join this army. Ryue's gaze swept across the 16 burly men who were at least 1 meters tall, and she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. Although they were wearing military uniforms, Ryue could clearly feel that the bodies covered by the uniforms of these American soldiers were very strong. The strength of their muscles was far from what ordinary people could compare to. Each and every one of them was tall, and coupled with the cold aura they exuded, they looked like steel lions. Every mecha warrior was wearing a helmet with a red light constantly flickering back and forth on the helmet. She didn't know what it was for. The protective suits on their bodies, which were the same color as the mecha, constantly emitted layers of energy fluctuations. It was obvious that they had special effects. What surprised Ryue the most was the American military insignia worn by the mecha warriors in front of her. She could tell that the 16 burly men were at least colonels, and the one leading them was actually a lieutenant general. Clearly, the people here were all at least squad leaders and above. The one leading them was even a senior captain. The American mecha warriors were divided into decimal units. 10 people formed a squad, 100 people formed a squadron, and 1,000 people formed a brigade. A squad leader was a lieutenant colonel or colonel, a squadron leader was a major general, and a senior captain was a lieutenant general. There were only 2 senior captains in the entire Mecha Legion, and they only obeyed the orders of the president. In other words, the burly man standing at the front of the group, who was nearly 3 meters tall and had a body like a city wall, was one of the senior captains. After identifying this, Ryue couldn't help but reveal a faint sneer. She knew that the United States wanted to leave a deep impression on the Guardians of the East. At the same time, it was also to intimidate the Greek Guardians and the Vatican. However, could they really succeed? Could those huge mechas compete with the Zodiac warriors? Although she became more cautious, the contempt in Ryue's eyes increased. Guanxin came to Ryue's side and said in a low voice, "According to the information our country has received, these mecha warriors are all wearing holographic helmets. The bodies of the mechas are mainly made of titanium alloy with carbon fibers added and cast with nanotechnology. Its attack and defense were both extremely shocking. Since the mecha was only maintained at a height of about 4 to 5 meters, it was still able to maintain extreme agility during combat. Coupled with the most advanced radar lock-on device, this thing could be said to be almost invincible in a ground battle. Even if there is only a small team of mecha warriors, under the premise of not considering nuclear weapons, they would still be able to face an entire armor division and not be at a disadvantage. These mechas look the same on the surface, but according to the pilot's ability to withstand different pressures, the mecha's internal configurations were also different. In other words, the stronger the pilot, the more powerful the mecha. This was also an important reason why the number of mecha warriors could only be maintained at around 1,000 before this mission. Apart from the mecha warriors who had rushed out this time, there were also the powerhouses who were originally mecha warriors. All of them were the trump cards of the U.S. military. The dozen or so people in front of him were obviously the trump cards of trump cards. It should be noted that the United States had spent a great deal of effort to create this mecha legion. At least 1/3 of the national defense budget for the past 5 years had been invested in this research. Before coming to the United States, I heard from our country's senior military officials that the United States had developed mecha warriors, which indicates that the world's military will be developing toward a comprehensive, integrated combat unit. I used to study genetics. If my guess is correct, the bodies of these mecha warriors have been modified by genetic drugs. As for the extent of the modification, I don't know. As for the extent of the modification, it can only be seen in battle. After listening to Guan Ping's words, Ryue's understanding of these mecha warriors deepened. The lieutenant general of the mecha warriors walked forward and stood beside the Pope and Yumo. He nodded slightly at the Zodiac warriors and said, "According to yesterday's agreement, on the premise of friendly sparring, I am very happy to be able to compete with the Guardians of the East." Ryue returned the greeting and said, "Lieutenant General, you are too polite. May I know how your side has decided on today's competition?" The lieutenant general looked at Ryue's tall figure, and the expression on his face softened a little. The expression on her peerless face softened a little. The killing power of a beautiful woman was always great. Putting on a gentlemanly appearance, she said, "The competition was proposed by my side. As for the method of the competition, why don't you decide it? However, in view of the fact that we are about to set off for space, in order not to reduce our overall strength, let's use a saying from your Yanhuang people. Don't overdo it." Looking at the other party who was pretending to be generous, Ryue smiled faintly and said, "In that case, I won't decline." Sweeping her gaze across the tall mecha warriors behind her, she said, "How about this? I really want to see the combat style of your mecha warriors. In order to give everyone more time to prepare for this mission, we will end the battle quickly. The 16 mecha warriors from your side will fight together and use your mechas. We will also send a Zodiac Guardian warrior to lead our own Zodiac team. A total of 11 people will fight. As for the outcome of the competition, it is simple. Whichever side loses the ability to fight will be the loser. If any side is seriously injured or dies, it will be the other side's loss. This way, we can ensure that both sides will not overdo it. How about that? 11 versus 16, and in a situation where their side was using mecha warriors? This mecha army lieutenant general thought that he had heard wrongly. Looking at her in a daze, he asked instinctively, "Beautiful Miss Dongfang, are you sure you want to do this?" Ryue smiled faintly and said, "Why not? I don't think there is anything unfair about this. If you think that we have too many people, we can also reduce the number of people." No, that's not what I meant. Since it is a competition, it has to be fair. If we use mecha, how can we talk about fairness? I think that we should each send out 16 people and fight barehanded. If we use mecha, the first thing will be unfair. Also, it will be hard for us to guarantee your safety. After all, the combat power of mecha is too strong. Ryue smiled and said, "What we want to see is the strength of your mecha. Lieutenant General, let's do as I say. Didn't you say that we will decide the method of the competition?" The Lieutenant General looked at the smiling Rue. For some reason, he suddenly felt a little strange in his heart. These Easterners were even more arrogant than they, the mecha warriors. Even if they had extraordinary strength, in front of mecha warriors, what was the use of strength? It should be known that a heat ray gun alone could destroy the life force of any living being. Even a 60-ton tank would be like a piece of paper in front of a heat ray gun. There was no way it could withstand it. Thinking of this, the doubt in his heart deepened. He turned his gaze to the Pope beside him, revealing a hint of inquiry in his eyes. The Pope nodded and said, "Since Miss Ryue has said so, I think it is feasible. Lieutenant General Reed, let's do this. You must not underestimate the strength of the Guardians of the East. To be able to reach the position of Lieutenant General and become the captain of the #1 elite legion of the United States, Lieutenant General Reed was naturally not a fool." After hearing the Pope's words, he also vaguely felt that the strength of the Guardians of the East seemed to be much higher than he had expected. However, due to his absolute confidence in the mecha, he still did not think that the other party had the ability to defeat his elite subordinates. "Since you want to humiliate yourselves, then I will show you the strength of a mecha warrior." Thinking of this, Reed nodded to Ryue and said, "In that case, we will do our best to ensure your safety." Ryue did not say anything else. She just made a gesture to Reed. Using facts to speak was the best way to do things. The 16 super strong men returned to their mechas. With a low roar of the engine, these most advanced individual combat weapons began to be activated. They walked step by step towards the Pope and Yumu. After Yumu whispered a few words to the Pope, she retreated to the side with her Constellation Guardians and quietly watched the scene in front of her. She was familiar with the strength of the Zodiac warriors, so she was naturally not worried about the battle in front of her. At this moment, Yumu was more concerned about when Chi-Yu would arrive. Could he bring the power of the Dark Parliament here to participate in this mission to save Earth? Chapter 279. Ming Ming had long been eager to give it a try. Ever since she reached the 8 cloud level, she could be said to be the second best among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, with the exception of Ryue. Only Su Dong's ability could barely be compared to hers. This was not because the Tiger Zodiac was inferior to the Chicken Zodiac. Ming Ming's achievements today were mostly thanks to the blood that Chi-Yu fed her. Kieran's blood had a great effect on any Zodiac. At that time, in order to save Ming Ming, Chi-Yu generously fed her a large amount of his blood, causing a certain change in Ming Ming's bloodline. Under the effect of Kieran's blood, her Chicken Zodiac's bloodline had greatly improved. It was not just a simple increase in strength, but also increased her overall potential as a Chicken Zodiac warrior. Except for the powerful Tyrannosaurus Rex like Ryue, the other Zodiac warriors were no match for her in terms of potential. A faint light flashed, and Ming Ming shouted in a low voice, "Chicken Zodiac team, fight." As she said that, she strode out. In the Zodiac army, the 10 Zodiac warriors who stood behind her followed closely behind Ming Ming. Since Ming Ming was a woman, her Chicken Zodiac team was mostly composed of women. Out of the 10 members, 7 were women. Among the members of the 4 major families in Ming Ming's Chicken Zodiac team, there were 3 children from the Zhou and Su families and 2 from the other 2 families. The strength was very balanced. The 10 Zodiac warriors followed behind Ming Ming. 11 of them walked calmly to the center of the training ground, while the others slowly retreated to the sides, quietly waiting for the competition between paranormals and advanced technology. 16 Zodiac warriors with a height of more than 4 meters. Facing 11 Eastern humans, the overall momentum of the Chicken Zodiac team was not on the same level at all. The roar of the engines of the Zodiac warriors and the energy fluctuations produced by their bodies were constantly heard. The Chicken Zodiac team couldn't compare. However, when the Pope and Yamu saw the Chicken Zodiac team walk out from the Zodiac army, their expressions changed. The soldiers of the United States might not have sensed anything, but as powerhouses of the world, how could they not have sensed it? The murderous aura emanating from every member of the Chicken Zodiac squad was definitely not something an ordinary person could compare to. Putting aside their strength, just their strong killing intent alone was not something that could be achieved through ordinary training. From their bodies, one could even smell the distinct scent of blood. If it wasn't for the fact that he had experienced blood and fire a few times in the past, such a situation would never have occurred. At that moment, both Yamu and the Pope experienced it deeply. The strength of the hundreds of people who came with the 12 Zodiac Guardian God warriors was much stronger than they had expected. However, they really did not understand where Chiyu had found these people. Where did they train them to be so murderous? Facing 16 Zodiac warriors with modern weapons, they did not panic at all. These Zodiac warriors didn't panic or feel nervous at all. There was only one kind of light in their eyes, the light of determination. The expression on Ming Ming's face calmed down. There was no worry or joy on her face. The thundercloud force in her body was circulating rapidly. At that moment, she not only controlled her own strength, but also the strength of every member of the Chicken Zodiac team. After the battle with the Jilly people during the era of the ancient behemoths, every member of the 12 Zodiac team had made great progress. Those few months of training had tempered them. It was definitely not something that could be compared to 10 years in the modern world. Every day, they had to survive in blood and fire, and every moment, they had to prepare for the arrival of death. It could be said that the Grim Reaper had tempered their will. At the same time, every Zodiac Guardian God warrior had also forged a deep friendship with their team members. That was the relationship of comrades in arms. Between each other, they had saved each other's lives countless times. Each time, they had grown up through hardships. Therefore, Ming Ming did not need to use her eyes to see. She only needed to feel to know what kind of state her team members were in. The 16 Zodiac Guardian God warriors stopped 30 meters away from Ming Ming's group of 11. Lieutenant General Reed's voice sounded from his mecha. "Beautiful Miss Dongfang, are you sure you want to compete with us like this?" Ming Ming snorted coldly. "Are you Americans all so clingy? Be straightforward. Come on." "All right. Since that's the case, we'll have to offend you. Attack." Berserk Tiger Formation. All of the mecha warriors spat out flames about 1 meter long from their backs. The 6 special engines on their backs started up at the same time, and the 16 mecha warriors spread out in all directions at the same time. Then, they quickly surrounded Ming Ming and the other 11 Zodiac warriors. They didn't use their heat ray guns or their own laser blades. They just spread out their arms, as if they wanted to defeat their opponents in melee combat. Seeing this, Ryu, who was watching from the sidelines, could not help but nod inwardly. The quality of these American soldiers was still very high. Because they had the advantage of mechas, they seemed to have decided not to use the weapons on their mechas. A favorable impression rose in her heart, but at the same time, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of threat could these Zodiac Guardian God warriors pose? Without waiting for Ming Ming's order, the 10 members of the Chicken Zodiac Guardian God warriors spread out at the same time. They did not roar in anger. Their cold eyes and nimble movements were like cheetahs as they silently faced their opponents. They did not have any weapons, but their bodies glowed with different colors. Ming Ming stood in the same place. Her spiritual power enhanced her perception by several times, and she could clearly feel the battle situation of each member of the Chicken Zodiac Guardian God warriors. The 3 Zhou family warriors were the fastest. They were the first to approach the 3 Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Their skin glowed with a metallic luster. They did not use any techniques or evade, and they met the attacks of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors head-on. A violent collision sound rang out. Amidst the roar, The American soldiers who were watching the battle from afar were shocked to find that after the 3 Zodiac Guardian God warriors collided with the 3 Asians, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors' momentum was abruptly halted. Their forward momentum was forcibly halted. The violent stop of their bodies and the sound of metal colliding shook everyone's hearts. At the same time, the other members of the Chicken Zodiac Guardian God warriors each stopped a Zodiac Guardian God warrior. The flames were scorching hot. The dark green haze and the gentle blue ripples clashed with the Zodiac Guardian God warriors in different ways. The 10 members of the Chicken Zodiac Guardian God warriors blocked the advance of the 10 Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Ming Ming could not help but feel a little surprised by the 10 Zodiac Guardian God warriors. The first thing that surprised her was the sturdiness of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. The Zodiac Guardian God warriors were made of titanium alloy and carbon fiber, forged with nanotechnology. The Zodiac Guardian God warriors were not at a disadvantage in the process of colliding with the 3 Zhou family members. They were really strong. At the same time, she was also surprised by the Zodiac Guardian God warriors' agility. The height of more than 4 meters did not affect the Zodiac Guardian God warriors' combat skills. Although the Zodiac Guardian God warriors were surprised by the toughness of the Chicken Zodiac Guardian God warriors, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors reacted quickly. They used fast and effective fighting methods to fight the Chicken Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Because they did not know each other well, they were only launching probing attacks. As the engines roared, the 6 Zodiac Guardian God warriors, including Lieutenant General Reed, arrived in front of Ming Ming. Under Reed's special command, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors did not attack. Instead, they surrounded Ming Ming. Reed said sincerely, "Very strong. You Asians are really strong. You can actually fight with the Zodiac Guardian God warriors with your human strength. I really admire you. I have to admit, if we don't use the Zodiac Guardian God warriors, our Zodiac Guardian God warriors are no match for you. But now, beautiful lady, you can surrender. No one can survive the siege of 6 Zodiac Guardian God warriors. It seems that you should at least send out the same number of Zodiac Guardian God warriors to compete with us. How about this?" Ming Ming's beauty was different from Ryue's. Ryue was like a blooming ice rose. Ming Ming, on the other hand, was like a pure and gentle lily. But no matter which one she was, it was easy to attract a man's attention. On one hand, they still needed to cooperate. On the other hand, Reed did not want to hurt the beautiful woman in front of him. That was why he made such a suggestion. After all, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors had the advantage in numbers. Even if Ming Ming's team surrendered, it would not be a shameful thing. Ming Ming said, "What? Do you want to go back on your word? That won't do. Why not? You haven't defeated me yet." Reed was stunned. Just as he was about to persuade Ming Ming again, he heard Ming Ming's gentle voice. "Be careful." The next moment, the radar that had never failed before suddenly lost track of the beauty. What kind of speed was this? He reacted immediately and immediately turned around. With a speed that was hard to follow with the naked eye, he controlled his mecha to kick backwards. His rich combat experience made him understand that his opponent was very likely to be right behind him. That's right, Reed's judgment was indeed quick, and his actions were also very swift. Even his subordinates were only half a beat slower before they did the same thing. However, they were still a little too slow. What was the use of mechas in front of the Chicken Zodiac warrior, Ming Ming? A faint light flickered, and Ming Ming's body appeared where she had been standing in an instant. The next moment, she threw out 6 punches without any pause. 6 streaks of rainbow light struck the backs of the 6 mechas at the same time. With Ming Ming as the center, the 6 huge mechas scattered in all directions like blooming flowers. Ming Ming stood there calmly with her hands behind her back. Her pretty face was still very calm. She looked in the direction of the Pope and Yamu with a hint of provocation. It was as if nothing had happened. Following 6 loud bangs, the 6 mechas fell heavily on the empty ground 20 meters away. The friction between the hard mechas and the ground produced a piercing sound that made one's teeth ache. Reed had never suffered such a huge loss before. He didn't even have time to control his mecha and was already dizzy from the fall. This was an outcome that he had never expected, but it was also an outcome that he could not accept. Ming Ming's attack didn't really damage the 6 mechas. It only left a small fist mark on the chest area of each mecha. It was about 3 inches deep, and it looked as obvious as the badges they were wearing. This time, Reed didn't dare to underestimate the opponent in front of him. With a low growl, he took the lead and rushed towards Ming Ming. The other 5 mechas that followed him surrounded Ming Ming in different ways. With their huge bodies that were more than 4 meters tall, they easily sealed off every possible direction that Ming Ming could dodge. Did Ming Ming need to dodge? The answer was, of course, no. Compared to the members of the Chicken Zodiac team, as the team leader and one of the top Zodiac Guardian warriors, even the Pope wouldn't be able to defeat her without summoning 2 archangels, let alone these mechas in front of her. This time, they could only watch helplessly as the rainbow-like light attacked them. Although the speed and agility of the mechas were very good, in a close combat situation, with their huge bodies, Ming Ming didn't even need to lock onto them. She could easily hit each of them. They didn't even touch the corner of Ming Ming's clothes. The 6 mechas returned to the place where they fell, but this time, they were facing the sky. Reed's entire body was in pain from the violent shaking of the mecha. Even with his strong body, he felt a little overwhelmed. Another fist mark appeared on his chest. His brain short-circuited. How is this possible? How is this possible? That was just a beautiful girl. Looking at her appearance, she was at most in her 20s. However, in front of her, the 6 mecha warriors were like toys, and they were sent flying twice in succession. How much strength did that require? Could it be that she was a superwoman? Even if she was a superwoman, she probably wouldn't be able to do all this. It should be known that although the body of each mecha soldier was made of light alloy, it definitely weighed more than 3 tons. To send a mecha flying with 6 punches at the same time, one would need at least twice the strength of one's weight. Moreover, she had left deep marks on the incomparably hard titanium alloy. How could a battle like this be carried out? No matter how good one's fighting skills were, when faced with such an enemy, it was impossible to win in a close combat. Just as Reed got up from the ground again, the same roars sounded in different corners of the training ground. With their special control over metal, the 3 members of the Chicken Zodiac team finally knocked down the 3 mecha that were fighting them. With their scorching fire energy, the 3 members of the Su family forced the 3 mecha to retreat due to the temperature. The Battle of the Shun family was even simpler. With the help of Chi Yu's source of nature, their strength had improved significantly. On the metal-reinforced concrete ground, where no plants could grow, they managed to create a few special plants that belonged to the ancient beasts. These plants entangled the mechas and restricted every joint on the mechas, making it impossible for the 2 mechas to move. As for the 2 members of the Chicken Zodiac team from the Luo family, what they did was very simple. During the battle, they turned their water ability into ice to cool down the engines of the 2 mechas. This caused the mechas to suffer a great deal of damage, and they couldn't even jump. Complete defeat. The result was clear. Even a 3-year-old child could easily judge the outcome of the battle. Reed stood rooted to the ground. He simply couldn't believe that the powerful mecha warriors had lost so miserably and completely in front of ordinary humans who didn't use any weapons. He wasn't the only one who couldn't defeat the human body with his titanium alloy mecha. Even the entire United States couldn't accept such a result. The light in Reed's eyes gradually changed. The contempt from before had completely disappeared, replaced by incomparable solemnity and the courage of a soldier. The members of the Chicken Zodiac team didn't continue to attack the mecha warriors. They all returned to Ming Ming's side and formed a circle around Ming Ming, protecting her in the center. This formation also allowed them to receive energy support from Ming Ming at any time. Back when they were dealing with the Jilly people, this formation was often used by the 12th Zodiac team. A faint light flashed in Ming Ming's beautiful eyes. Looking at the mecha where Lieutenant General Reed was, Ming Ming said calmly, "I know that you are not convinced of your defeat. It's no wonder. After all, you lost before you even had the chance to display your true strength. If it were me, I would also be unconvinced." As mecha warriors, your greatest advantage is your various high-tech weapons, right? Since that's the case, the previous match doesn't count. I hope to be able to witness the true power of a mech warrior. Only that kind of sparring is meaningful to us. What do you think, Lieutenant General? Reed quickly gave an order. 15 mechas with varying degrees of damage lined up behind him. He took large strides and slowly walked towards Ming Ming. Reed controlled his mecha to bend down and bow to Ming Ming and the members of the Chicken Zodiac team. I'm sorry. First of all, I apologize for looking down on the Easter Guardian. Mysteriously in the East. It gave us a shocking realization. It turned out that the strength of humans could also reach such a powerful level. This was something I had never imagined before. However, I still have absolute confidence in my mecha. After all, the mecha warrior had been designed. It was meant to be useful in large-scale battles and even in future space battles. You're right. If you don't let me unleash the full power of a mech warrior, I won't be able to kill you. However, we did lose the previous match. However, we have indeed lost the previous battle. On behalf of the Mecha Legion, I would like to express my deepest respect to you. We absolutely believe that you can play an extremely crucial role in carrying out this mission. We hope that we can become the best allies. Ming Ming smiled faintly and said, "Then, do we still want to continue with the match?" Reed smiled bitterly in his mecha. In fact, the result just now was enough. However, even if he could accept a complete defeat under such circumstances, could the American Department of National Defense accept it? If he were to go back like this, he would no longer be the captain of the Mecha Corps in less than an hour. For the sake of the dignity of the country, this match must continue. After a moment of silence, Reed slowly said, "We admit defeat in today's match. We admit that we can't compare to you in terms of hand-to-hand combat. However, I believe that you also want to understand the true strength of our mecha warriors. Why don't we have another match that doesn't require us to fight and won't incur any losses? What do you think?" Ming Ming looked at Reed in surprise and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. These American soldiers are trying to regain some face. She nodded and said, "Please explain, Lieutenant General." Reed's face turned red. Fortunately, he was in the mecha, so no one could see him. He immediately thickened his face and said, "The main combat power of our mecha warriors lies in our various weapons. Excluding nuclear weapons, we have a total of 4 main weapons. They're the heat ray gun used in conventional combat, the laser knife with powerful cutting power, and the 2 small star missiles used against the air and ground. The homing missiles are specially developed for mechas. Although they aren't large, they're extremely powerful. A mecha equipped with 20 anti-air missiles and 16 anti-ground missiles is a moving fortress." In order to regain some face, Reed gave a simple introduction of the entire mecha. It sounded like he was explaining the mecha's abilities to familiarize everyone with it, but everyone knew that he was just showing off the mecha's offensive power to make up for his terrible defeat in hand-to-hand combat. However, although everyone knew his purpose, they still couldn't help but gasp when Reed opened up the mecha's shoulder, chest, and leg armor to reveal a total of 36 miniature missiles. At least he was right about one thing. This mecha developed by the United States was indeed like a moving fortress. If all 36 missiles were fired within a certain range, the destructive power they could create would be absolutely terrifying. Such a powerful mecha warrior was enough to become a nightmare for any country's armed forces. Its cost would definitely not be lower than a medium-sized fighter jet. Reed looked at the silent crowd through the scanner inside the mecha. He couldn't help but feel a lot better, and his tone also became a little more spirited. "How about this? Since we're going to cooperate this time, let's show His Holiness the Supreme Pontiff, Miss Yumu, and all the powerhouses present the destructive power of our mecha warriors. Raise the intensity targets." Following Reed's order, a huge target rose from the other side of the training ground, although it was unknown what it was made of. The 100 targets looked extremely solid. They were at least 5 meters thick and had a diameter of 10 meters. From afar, they looked like huge shields. Reed said, using the explosive force of 1,000 kilograms of TNT as a scale, These special targets can withstand up to 10 degrees of attack. At the same time, the specific strength of the attack can be displayed through the electronic equipment. Everyone, please take a look. In order to regain his face, he was willing to do anything. Although the abilities of the mecha he had displayed were military secrets to a certain extent, the United States had always been good at deterrence by force. This cooperation was unavoidable. In any case, the other countries would know the strength of the mecha sooner or later. Thus, he didn't hide anything. Following a clanging sound, a 2.5-meter-long heat ray gun appeared in the hands of the mecha operated by Reed. The silver-white body of the gun looked very beautiful. It had a streamlined design, and the body of the gun lit up with a red glow as it was filled with energy. With a flash of light, a red beam of light shot out and shot toward the target in the center. In the blink of an eye, a small red beam of light lit up on the target nearly a kilometer away. The soldier in charge of electronic control shouted through a loudspeaker, "Penetrate the target. The core strength has reached 0.5 degrees. 0.5 degrees might sound like a small number, but according to Lieutenant General Reed's description, it was a very small number. However, according to Lieutenant General Reed's description, the destructive power produced by the heat ray gun in an instant was actually comparable to 500 kilograms of TBB explosives. What kind of concept was this? It was no wonder that he was so proud of his mecha operator. While everyone was pondering, Reed moved. Under his control, the mecha rushed out like lightning. The engine power was instantly raised to the maximum, and during the short 500 meters of acceleration, the mecha reached the speed of sound. A red beam of light shot out from his hands and condensed into a huge long sword in front of him. With a loud bang, Reed's body swept past the previous target. The mecha formed an arc from bottom to top and flew high into the air. The attack strength of the beam saber linear attack, the strongest point is 0.3 degrees. This was the best way to describe the terrifying melee weapon. Reed's performance wasn't over yet. He controlled the mecha to fly higher and higher, and in the blink of an eye, he had already become a small black dot in the sky. Suddenly, black and white smoke shot out from the black shop. As the smoke became clearer, those with good eyesight could clearly see that it was a miniature homing missile. It was the same one that appeared on Reed's body just now. 36 missiles, regardless of whether they were aimed at the air or the ground, were actually fired by Lieutenant General Reed at the same time. A shocking scene appeared. Although they were fired at the same time, the 36 homing missiles were actually able to accurately find the target they were aiming at. An earthquake-like effect appeared, and the huge roar caused the entire base to tremble. 36 huge clouds of smoke appeared from the heavy targets, and the tyrannical explosive force brought about a huge wave of air. Even from thousands of meters away, the Zodiac soldiers still had to use their own energy to resist and not be injured. With a whoosh, Reed controlled the mecha to descend from the sky. When it was about to reach the ground, it suddenly slowed down and landed steadily on the ground. The flames from the 6 engines on its back looked very dazzling, and the deterrence of the Iron Warrior was undoubtedly displayed. Overall attack power, 42 degrees. Air homing missile attack power, 26 degrees. Ground homing missile attack power, 16 degrees. The voice reported a little later. Reed wasn't exaggerating. These miniature missiles were made of unknown materials, but in terms of attack power, they were definitely not inferior to the conventional missiles carried by any bomber. Guanqing said to Rain Eye with some amazement. It seems that we still underestimated these guys. Not to mention 10 mecha warriors. Even if there's only one, it can occasionally bring a devastating disaster to an entire armored division when they are caught off guard. It seems that our country still has a long way to go in this regard. Reed smiled and said, "Excuse me, everyone. This is the true power of a mecha warrior." While we were on this mission, in addition to these homing bombs, we will also attach 4 nuclear bombs to the back of each mecha operator for the mission. What he said now could be considered a naked threat. He was clearly telling everyone that if a mecha warrior was equipped with a nuclear warhead, the effect would not be as simple as it was now. A super army of 1,600 mecha warriors definitely had the power to destroy an entire country. The Pope's eyes were filled with shock. Of course, he also knew how powerful these mecha warriors were. Indeed, with such powerful technology, it would be very difficult to use one's physical body to resist it, no matter how strong one was. Mecha warriors armed with nuclear bombs could only be described as killing machines. More importantly, there were more than 1,600 such mecha warriors. With them, and with enough ammunition, the United States could conquer all the countries on Earth. If it weren't for the deterrence of nuclear weapons, who could guarantee that the United States would not do such a thing? Ming Ming looked at the big guy beside her, nodded, and said, "Very strong, really very strong. For human technology to reach such a level, it can be considered to have entered another stage of weapons." Reed smiled calmly and said, "Actually, mecha warriors are not prepared to deal with battles on Earth. After all, even without these mecha warriors, the United States' military strength is still the strongest in the world. With the passage of time, technology has become more and more advanced. However, our Earth has also become weaker and smaller. In the near future, the United States will definitely become the first country to migrate to another planet, and mecha warriors will be the best guarantee. In space battles, these mecha warriors are the most suitable." Ming Ming nodded. Although she was somewhat unconvinced, she had to admit that these mecha warriors were very powerful no matter what the situation was. However, as a person of Yin Huang and the daughter of General Ji Zhongming, Ming Ming naturally would not allow these American soldiers to show off their strength. A faint seven-colored light shone from Ming Ming's body. "Since General Reed is so magnanimous as to show your country's military secrets to us, I have nothing to hide. Since General Reed is so magnanimous, I have nothing to hide. Let me try and see what kind of results these targets can bring me." As she spoke, she completed the first stage of origin mutation while surrounded by the seven-colored light. Chapter 280. Before Reed could think too much about it, Ming Ming had already flown into the air. The faint rainbow light suddenly became more intense. At the same time, she completed the second stage of origin mutation. Under the stimulation of the mecha warrior's firepower, this time, Ming Ming used all her strength. Following the second stage of origin mutation, her delicate body quickly glided towards the targets. Countless rainbow lights circulated in the air, turning into dazzling rays of light that drifted out from her body and drifted towards one of the targets. The faint light flickered, as if a rainbow had appeared in the air. However, this rainbow light was very complicated. There was no roar. The rainbow light quietly sank into one of the targets. Ming Ming's delicate body stopped in the middle of gliding. As a chicken Zodiac warrior, before using Phoenix fledgling transformation, she could only glide and not fly. Thus, her delicate body turned in the air and glided back in the direction from which she came. The power of a single attack is 0.01 degrees. After hearing this report, Lieutenant General Reed heaved a sigh of relief. Lieutenant General Reed immediately heaved a sigh of relief. After all, there was still a huge gap between them. Although the number 0.01 was still very terrifying when compared to the power of a human's attack, it was equivalent to the power of 10 kilograms of TT explosives. Thinking of this, Reed suddenly felt that something was wrong. Because he suddenly remembered that the defense of his mecha warriors was definitely not something that could be destroyed by 0.1 degrees of attack. She had clearly left quite a few marks on the mecha warriors before, and her strength should have increased as she glided in midair. So why did her attack power decrease? Just as Reed was feeling inexplicably surprised, a shrill alarm sounded. Amidst the loud bang, the target that was attacked by the colorful rainbow had turned into ashes, and the huge explosive force caused the two targets around it to tremble violently. "What's going on? Wasn't it only 0.01 degrees?" Reed shouted in shock. The voice of the communications soldier also became shaky. It was clearly transmitted through the loudspeaker. "Yes, it's indeed only 0.01 1 degrees of single-target attack strength. However, the number of attacks is more than 1,000. So the 10-degree target, buzz, the entire training ground suddenly erupted into an uproar. Destroying a target was something that had never happened since the construction of this training ground. After all, no one would use large weapons or nuclear weapons here. These targets were made with extremely special techniques. 10 degrees of tolerance was equivalent to 10 tons of TNT explosives. However, the rainbow in the sky was clearly a manifestation of human power. Everything that Ming Ming had done had completely subverted the American soldiers' understanding of human power. However, Ming Ming didn't stop there. Her gliding body changed again. That's right, the fledgling phoenix appeared. Her suddenly enlarged body was like a small plane with a dazzling light. Her graceful posture attracted the attention of everyone below. The Pope had heard about the fledgling phoenix from the cardinals, but when he saw it with his own eyes, he couldn't help but open his mouth in shock. He knew that if he didn't summon the archangel, it would be very difficult for him to compete with such a powerhouse. As for Yamu, she had seen the power of the fledgling phoenix with her own eyes. At that time, Ming Ming had relied on the fledgling phoenix to easily defeat the Capricorn constellation guardian, Miero. At this point, she had already guessed what Ming Ming was going to do. After completing the fledgling phoenix, Ming Ming's body instantly soared, and her speed suddenly increased to the limit. This time, a beautiful rainbow really appeared in the sky. It was a rainbow formed by Ming Ming's body. The rainbow floated down and swept past the target, followed by a second, a third, all the way to the 10th target before it flew up again. Attack strength, unable to determine. The messenger's trembling voice had yet to fade away when the 10 targets that Ming Ming had passed through with her fledgling phoenix transformation collapsed with a loud bang, split in half from middle. This was the effect of Ming Ming's wide wings. The Azura Iron Wings technique focused all the energy in the body on a single line of the wings. How powerful would Ming Ming's full-powered attack be? In the face of such a Azura Iron Wings technique, even Yamu would have to consider if she should face it head-on. Reed's brain had completely short-circuited. When he realized that Ming Ming had turned back into her human form and landed in front of him, he couldn't react in time. Ming Ming's face was a little pale. Ryue came to her side and secretly transferred her thundercloud force to her. Destroying 10 targets in one go was the limit of what Ming Ming could bear. However, for the dignity of her country, she had to do it. With the support of Ryue's energy, Ming Ming's pretty face quickly regained its color. She said to Reed, "Lieutenant General Reed, I think that as long as our country has guardians like us, we don't need mecha warriors. Don't you think so?" Reed woke up from his short-circuited state. He looked at Ming Ming in front of him. He no longer saw her as a human. Not to mention him, perhaps no one present had expected such an outcome. Such an outcome was enough for him to go back and explain himself. After all, losing in the face of absolute power was no longer a crime. His strength was far inferior to the opponent. What else could he say? He deeply believed that even if it was just Ming Ming alone, as long as she could maintain the intensity and speed of her attacks for a certain period of time, even 100 mecha warriors might not be a match for her. The tyrannical attack power produced in that instant was enough to destroy 10 targets. It was definitely not something a titanium alloy could withstand. At that moment, the last bit of pride in Reed's heart crumbled because of Ming Ming. He activated his mecha and walked out. He looked at the Zodiac warriors in front of him. There was only respect and fear in his eyes. Just as Reed was about to say something, a long whistle suddenly came from afar. Along with it was a loud alarm that sounded throughout the entire base. In the distance, a dark red light with a hint of golden light was approaching them from the sky at an alarming speed. The base's surface-to-air missile defense system quickly began to move, trying to lock onto the enemy through the radar. A hint of joy appeared on the pretty faces of Ryue and Ming Ming at the same time. Ryue hurriedly said to Reed, "Don't misunderstand. It's one of us. Please remove the alarm." Reed was stunned for a moment. Although he was a lieutenant general, he belonged to a different system from this base. He had no right to directly give orders. However, after being subdued by Ming Ming, he was very cooperative and immediately sent a message to the base control center. Pure English sounded throughout the entire base and directly into the sky. "Attention, please. Please state your identity, otherwise you will be attacked. You will be responsible for the consequences. Please state your identity." Just as the attention of the broadcast and the entire base was focused on the dark red light, suddenly, the dark red light disappeared without warning. The originally huge energy fluctuations actually disappeared in an instant. This sudden change caused the entire base to become even more panicked. Reed was just about to ask a few questions to Ryue, but he was surprised to find that there was a man beside the two women. He didn't know when it happened, but there was already a man beside them. He was asking Ming Ming something with concern. This man was tall. Although he was not as tall as the mecha warriors, his figure looked much more coordinated. His long silver hair easily left a deep impression, and his black attire made people feel a little cold. There was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Although he could not be considered handsome, it was easy to easily give people a strange kind of attraction. What shocked Reed even more was that when this man appeared, other than the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors, the other members of the 12 Zodiac squad all knelt on one knee and respectfully saluted this man. This kind of salutation was extremely rare in the modern era. Who is he? The man was none other than Chiyu. He could feel Ming Ming's energy fluctuations from far away. The energy produced by the fledgling phoenix transformation surprised Chiyu. In his opinion, for Ming Ming to use the fledgling phoenix transformation, it was obvious that they had encountered an extremely powerful enemy. Therefore, he immediately increased his energy to the limit without hesitation and rushed over as fast as he could. His speed was actually so fast that even the radar could not lock onto him. After discovering that this was the U.S. military base, he immediately used Kieran's stealth skill and 1,000 transformations of the Big Dipper realm to teleport to the two women. After listening to Ming Ming's simple explanation, Chiyu finally understood what was going on. He couldn't help but be secretly shocked. The strength of the mecha warriors was enough to threaten other countries in the world. Ming Ming's decision to use this to deter the other party was very correct. After all, this would also make the United States think more about the existence of these people if they wanted to do anything to the Yanwang Republic in the future. Lieutenant General Reed took a few steps forward and asked tentatively, "Sir, you are?" Ryue stuck close to Chiyu and held his arm. She said proudly, "This is the strongest of the Guardians of the East, the King of the Zodiac." The strongest? A huge question mark suddenly appeared in Reed's mind. Wasn't that girl just now the strongest? Could it be that this man was even stronger than her? Oh my God, the mysterious East. What kind of freak have you given birth to? Chiyu smiled slightly, and the light in his eyes gradually became stronger. The invisible domineering aura made him look much taller than he actually was. He nodded at Reed and said, "Hello, Your Excellency, Lieutenant General. There are many companions who came with me. Should you immediately inform the base to prevent any misunderstandings?" Reed was even more surprised when he heard Chiyu's words. However, he also needed to immediately report the situation here to his superiors, so he took this opportunity to deal with it. Chiyu held Ryue's hand in one hand and Ming Ming's hand in the other. He greeted the 12 Guardians of the Zodiac. After completing his trip to the Covenant of Darkness, he finally arrived in time. Looking at him, the 12 Guardians of the Zodiac didn't know whether they should be happy or worried. The mission was about to start, and no one could guarantee that they would come back alive. The universe was not like Earth, and unpredictable situations could happen at any time. The Pope and Yamu were also shocked when they saw Chiyu suddenly appear, but their emotions were completely different. The Pope was very depressed when he saw Chiyu, but after hearing what Chiyu said to Reed, he knew that the strongest person in the East had succeeded, and the enemy of the Vatican was about to arrive. Yamu's feelings were much more complicated than the Pope's. She didn't worry as much about the Covenant of Darkness as the Pope, but she was more concerned about Chiyu. She felt the aura of Chiyu, but he didn't even look at her. That kind of indescribable pain made the blood on Yamu's face slowly fade away. "Mr. Chi, it's nice to see you again." Pope Marty took the initiative to walk over. Faced with Chi Yu's strong ambassador, he had secretly given up on the idea of dealing with the Guardians of the East. Since he couldn't fight them head-on, he now hoped to cooperate with the Guardians of the East. Although their relationship was very stiff in the past, and he was once hostile to Chi Yu, through the cooperation training in this mission, Marty hoped to establish a certain relationship with Chi Yu and the Guardians of the East. That way, it would obviously be beneficial for the Vatican's various operations in the world in the future. Chi Yu nodded at Marty, neither showing any affection nor rejection. "Your Excellency, hello. I think you must have guessed that my trip to Germany this time has been completed. I hope that before the end of this mission, you and your subordinates won't do anything that will make everyone uncomfortable." Marty, of course, knew what he was referring to. He smiled and said, "Of course, I guarantee with my reputation that the Vatican will definitely look at the big picture. Of course, the premise is that those degenerates can restrain themselves. Otherwise, in order not to affect our operation this time, as the leader of the Vatican, I can only use some special methods to solve the problem." Chi didn't pay any attention to him, because he found that Yamu's aura was tightly locked on him. Experts of the same level could sense very strongly. Yamu's energy waves were very strong, and her tyrannical aura could easily make him feel alarmed. He subconsciously turned around to look at her pale face. The light in his eyes was still as cold as ever. He slightly pursed his lips and frowned. "What's the matter?" Yamu lowered her head and said faintly, "I didn't expect that I could only use this method to attract your attention." Chi Yu's eyes flickered. "Don't worry, you will still attract my attention. Our matter isn't over yet. After this mission is completed, I will definitely look for you again. At that time, it will be a battle between us. I won't be lenient." Yamu raised her head abruptly, and two rays of light flashed in her eyes as she stared at Chi Yu's firm gaze. "Well, I won't be lenient either. However, please remember, before this mission is over, we are not enemies for the time being. I think you should also understand that in such a dangerous mission, if we don't cooperate with each other, once something goes wrong, the consequences are not something you and I can bear. Chi Yu, I don't need you to tell me what to do. Just restrain your own men. Let's go." After saying that, he led the Zodiac warriors out of the training ground. Looking at the back of Chi Yu, Yamu's firm gaze gradually changed. She said to herself, "Why do we all have to live in such a chaotic world? Chi Yu, perhaps we won't even have the chance to duel again." What Master Zagla said was right. Earth would face many calamities. Who could guarantee that after the asteroid calamity was over? Who can guarantee that after the asteroid disaster is over? Do you know? I already have a premonition that the disaster of the West is coming. While walking, Chi briefly learned about the situation here from Ryue. Ryue's answer made Chi feel a lot more relaxed. The disaster will appear the day after tomorrow. Now, everything was ready. The Guardian of the East and other experts from all sides had gathered in this base, and now they were just waiting for the arrival of the mission. 20 minutes later, the members of the Covenant of Darkness, led by Longair, arrived. In order to conceal their identity, these guys deliberately wore the clothes of the Yanhuang Republic. Under the coordination of the Zodiac warriors led by Chi Yu, as well as the order of the Yanhuang Republic that Chi Yu had obtained before coming here, the United States allowed these hundreds of people to enter the base. On the surface, everyone knew that these people were not the experts of the Yanhuang Republic. However, after all, the Pope and Yamu still knew that the overall situation was the most important. With the coordination of their identities, these experts belonging to the Covenant of Darkness were able to stay in the room next to the Guardian of the East. After a brief discussion with Longair, Chi Yu decided not to waste any more time. They immediately carried out a simple space survival training and explained the mission to the members of the Covenant of Darkness, which fell on the Guardians of the East. Although the members of the Covenant of Darkness came from the darkness, there was also an advantage. The Dark Warriors were the dark race that absolutely obeyed orders, and the Dark Liches were the representatives of wisdom in the darkness. Under Longair's orders, these guys were able to accept very quickly. As for the test in the American base, it was very simple for them. However, when Lung saw the mecha warriors of the United States, the light in her beautiful eyes made even Chiyu feel a little strange. Chiyu called out to Lung, who was watching her subordinate's adaptation training in the space simulation. Lung gaze shifted to Chiyu and immediately became gentle. Chiyu said, "Miss Lung, I hope you don't have any ideas about those mecha warriors. You should know that they're the main force of this mission." Lung smiled and said, "Why? Are you worried about me? I won't. At least, I won't do anything until the mission is completed. Actually, even if I want to, I'm afraid I can't do anything. Right now, whether it is the Holy See, the Greek Guardians, or the American Intelligence Department, I'm afraid their attention is on us. As long as we make the slightest move, they will immediately attack us. This time, the United States has taken out all their capital without any hesitation. They will definitely not allow anyone to destroy us, right?" Chiyu nodded and said, "It's good that you understand." Lung moved closer to Chiyu and gently blew into his ear. She lowered her voice and said, "Don't forget your promise to me." Chiyu's body stiffened slightly. In the face of such a temptation, it would be impossible for him not to be tempted. However, he still had his guard up against Lung. As the saying goes, those who are not of the same race are bound to have different intentions. Even if Lung had always been good to him, there was no harm in being a little cautious. However, whenever Chiyu thought about the conditions he had promised Lung, he could not help but ask himself, was it to allow the Dark Parliament to participate in this mission, or was it because of Lung beauty? There was no answer to this question, because Chiyu did not know how to answer it. He only knew that when he agreed to this answer, he seemed to have some expectations in his heart. Chiyu moved his body slightly and said with a frown, "Miss Lung, please conduct yourself with dignity. I will naturally do what I promised you. However, I also hope that you can keep your promise and restrain your subordinates." Lung revealed a faint trace of sadness. "How can I not restrain them? Here, we have no friends, only enemies. Although I'm confident, I am afraid that the Dark Parliament will be destroyed in my hands if I really want to do anything in the face of so many powerhouses. Don't worry, I'm also here to protect Earth. You are right, hell, cannot lose Earth as our foundation. All right, I will also go exercise." As she spoke, she strode towards the space adaptation training ground. Looking at Lung back, Chiyu's gaze froze. At this moment, a cold voice sounded behind him. "What conditions did you promise her?" Chiyu did not turn around. He said, "Sorry, I can't tell you. Christy, there are some things that are better for you not to know." The person who came was Christy. This time, Christy had also tagged along with the Dark Parliament. Chiyu did not tell her about the mission, but as the leader of the vampire race, it was impossible for Christy to leave the Dark Parliament. However, it was impossible for Christy to leave the Dark Parliament that she hated. Lung phone call made her understand Chiyu's true reason for looking for her. That was why when Chiyu returned to Germany and was about to set off with the Dark Parliament, Christy appeared before him. "Why, Chiyu, could it be that you have been bewitched by her beauty?" Christy walked to Chiyu and stood beside him. Chiyu turned his head and looked at her. "In your heart, I only this kind of man." Christy looked at Chiyu and smiled mockingly. "Then what do you think? From Ming Ming to Shan Yun, who is now Yu Yun, and then to Hai Riyue and Teacher Wenting. Which beautiful woman can't make you go after her like a flock of ducks? Even the air of Goddess Athena, isn't it the same?" She suddenly realized that Chiyu's expression had changed, so she stopped. If it was not long ago, he would have suddenly heard Christy mention his sorrows. Chiyu's emotions might have exploded in the past, but he wasn't going to do it now. It was not that he had forgotten everything. It was because he knew how to restrain himself. He had told himself more than once that if he could not control his emotions, he was not worthy to be a man. He did not forget his hatred, but buried it in the deepest part of his heart. "I'm sorry, Chiyu." The light in Christy's eyes softened. Chiyu waved his hand to stop her. "Don't worry. I will be fine. Actually, I have thought about it for a long time. Although I can't forgive Yumu, I also admire her. At least, I will never be able to make the choice she made. She gave up her feelings for the country, but I will never be able to do that. Perhaps we are the two different representatives of sensibility and rationality. I regret it. Do you know? For the death of Klinsmann, Wen Ting, and the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Queen, I really regret it. I regret falling in love with such a rational woman. If my judgment was right, and I understood Yamu's rationality better, perhaps the tragedy would not have happened. Christy sighed. I just hope that the tragedy won't happen to you again. Chiyu glanced at her and asked, You mean Long Air? Christy nodded and said, Yes, it's her. Compared to Yamu, I think this woman is more dangerous. Don't you think so? Chiyu said, Thank you for reminding me. However, I also knew how dangerous she was. However, in this world, those who used others might also be used. All right, you should also participate in the space simulation training. This will be good for the mission. Actually, I'm already regretting it. I regret asking you to join this operation. Christy smiled and said, You will protect me, won't you? Chiyu looked at her deeply. As long as I'm alive. Chiyu left and went back to his room. Christy stood there for a full 10 minutes before entering the training ground like Long Air. Everyone was nervously preparing, but Chiyu was an exception. He quietly sat on his bed and slowly practiced. He suddenly realized that he seemed to be able to control his emotions more and more, and this kind of control was very good for improving his strength. At least, now that he was calmly cultivating, he felt that he was finally going to break through the bottleneck of 8 Cloud and reach the true 8 Cloud realm. What he needed now was to push the last bit of Thundercloud force to the 8 Cloud level. A faint light flickered. Chiyu's gaze became more and more focused. The entire American military base was operating at high speed, under a huge, invisible pressure. Everything was in preparation for the takeoff the day after tomorrow. At this moment, everyone in this base decided the fate of Earth, but no one knew that the most important person was the king from the East.